Make a reservation. I'll email you my flight information." An hour later, she emailed her airline itinerary for a flight in 3 days. He emailed back, "Itinerary received. I'll pick you up by the baggage claim. Please bring the following documents, unless they're already here: your birth certificate, marriage licenses or certificates for both marriages, all documents you received after Mac Stone's death, death certificate, police reports, etc., any official documents regarding his theft of money from your accounts. Also bring anything else that strikes you as relevant that's not mentioned here. It's all ammunition for the search and the court cases. Your highly skilled attorney, etc." The next day, Warren used the number 3 burner phone to call Copes and McKeegan. He started with McKeegan. "I suppose you're wondering why you haven't heard from me." "No, you've been waiting for us to die of old age. Ain't gonna happen." "Mrs. Ellis's case has been settled. I'm ready to get started on the McKinley Stone case." "Well, it's about time," McKeegan said. "We were beginning to wonder if you'd found a way to screw us that we hadn't heard of." "Does that mean you're ready?" "Yes, it does. Do you want us to come to your office?" "No, it might take months to fix up after that fire. I'll arrange a meeting somewhere else. The rest of the building is okay, so I'm trying to get them to move us to another floor." "How do you want to do this, then?" "I'll call you at the place. You bring the material you've got, and we can start going over it and making plans. Is that acceptable to you?" "Let me talk to our mutual friend, and I'll get back to you." "Sure. Call me on this phone, and let me know what you guys decide." The 11:50 a.m. Hawaiian Airlines flight from Kahului Airport landed at LAX on time and taxied toward the terminal. In a moment, Linda Warren had her only bag on her lap and her seatbelt unfastened. She waited patiently for the crew of the plane and the ground crew to complete all the steps: the welcome to Los Angeles announcement, the warning about bags in the overhead compartments shifting, making the accordion folds of the boarding tunnel outside stretch out to press against the plane's fuselage, the unsealing and opening of the door. When all that was done, the aggressive passengers, who had to be first and had pushed their way ahead to the overhead compartments and were now occupying the aisle, began their lockstep advance past her and out the doorway. She was now 59, but had not yet let her hair go gray, so nobody stopped to let her into the aisle until another woman about her age came along, nodded and smiled. She stood, said "Thank you," slipped into the aisle, and headed for the door. Linda Warren had moved away from Los Angeles before her 50th birthday. By then, her only child had graduated from law school, passed the bar exam, and had started his own small law firm, seemed to be supporting himself, and didn't have time to accept much motherly attention. First, she had put her belongings in storage, rented out the house on the west side, and moved to a succession of different parts of the country. She would stay in each place for a year or two until she felt restless again, and then move somewhere else. She had lived in Hanover, New Hampshire, for long enough to explore New England, then wanted to be warm again, so she moved to Key West, Florida. She next tried New York City, but eventually found the crowds and tall buildings made her feel hemmed in. She then went to Hawaii, and after a time rented a house on Maui. The place suited her, and she made friends and felt happy until the fire, when 4 of the friends who lived in Lahaina died, and the others were all displaced. She had put up 12 of them in her rented house on the north side of the island. They had all moved out and moved on now, the families first, then the singles, one at a time. She was now considering moving on herself, to put herself physically away from the memories. The fact that they were good memories didn't help, because they were memories of people and places lost. She liked being near the sea better than other places, and was considering either the northwest coast of Washington or maybe a place in the east, like Maine. She walked with her head up and her spine straight, in her usual perfect posture. Her carry-on bag was strapped across her chest with her left arm resting on it. She kept her strides at the same pace from the landing gate, along the concourse, to the down escalators toward the baggage claim area, where people were waiting for passengers. She saw her son before the escalator had taken her down 5 feet, and then looked for the girlfriend. There she was, just at his shoulder, looking up to study Linda as she came down the escalator. Of course, she thought, and used the time to study her. Very pretty face. Shoulder-length dark brown hair, done by a good hairdresser. A modest dress to keep the cute figure from being the only impression, either because she was meeting his mother or she simply felt it was tasteful. Please make it be that. Vesper. It was odd, but she looked like somebody who was up to having a name like that. She reached the shiny floor and walked toward them as they came to meet her. Charlie held his hand out to take the strap of her bag and then leaned in to give her a kiss on the cheek. "Aloha," he said. "Linda Warren, this is Vesper Ellis." Linda held out her hand, and Vesper shook it. And then Linda held onto her hand and said, "You look like a very nice person, Vesper. I knew you would be when we talked on the phone. I'm pleased to meet you." "Thank you," Vesper said. "I'm very pleased to meet you." Charlie said, "Is this your only bag?" "Yes," she said. "I've become a very efficient packer since I moved away from here." "It's great to see you again, Mom. I turned in my rental car for a nicer one, in your honor." "I'm flattered. Lead the way." They drove north on the 405 freeway past the exit for Charlie's office or his condominium. "Where are we going?" Linda asked. Vesper said, "We talked and it seemed to us that it made the most sense if we all stayed at my house. It's bigger than Charlie's condo, and since your case could involve some pushback, the fact that neither of you are officially connected with my place might help keep things safer. There's plenty of room, so we won't feel crowded." Linda said, "That's very thoughtful of you." She turned to Charlie. "Tell me about this pushback." He said, "That's just it. I don't know what forms it might take. I've learned that one of the things that money does is attract predators, and sometimes it even turns people into predators who weren't before. I also know that Max Stone was a criminal, and I assume he knew other criminals. We're about to start tracing things backward, asking questions that somebody may not want answered. Sometimes people will do desperate things to protect secrets. We need to use your name as our legal right to ask, and the attorney doing the asking will be me. Same surname." Linda didn't take her eyes off him. He was keeping his eyes on the road ahead, or was he just avoiding looking at her? "I see," she said. "The real reason you wanted to drag me back to the mainland, to Los Angeles, was that you didn't want to start this while I was living alone in Hawaii. You're trying to protect me." "Well," he said, "your name is going to come up a lot." The next morning, Charlie drove his mother from Vesper's house to Warren and Associates. As soon as they were in the car and in motion, she said, "I've waited a long time to see you with a woman like her." He waited. Finally, he said, "And?" "You're both adults. You'll figure it out." They reached his office building, and he parked in one of the spaces for visitors in the underground garage, and they took the elevator up to the 3rd floor, where his firm had been moved into a new office. When they entered the outer office, Martha said, "Hello, Mrs. Warren. It's nice to see you again. Charlie, I put Mr. Copes and Mr. McKeegan in the conference room." "Thank you, Martha. Come on, Mom, time to get started." They walked into the big conference room. "Gentlemen, this is my mother, Linda Warren, and this is Alvin Copes and Andrew McKeegan, the men I told you about." She shook hands with them both, and then went to the chair that her son pulled out for her and sat. "All right, gentlemen," Charlie said. "Are those the papers you referred to?" McKeegan said, "Yes, we put them in this filing envelope right away because the manila envelope was greasy and grimy. But this is everything, and all of it is just the way it was." Copes said, "His name was Daniel Webster Rickinger. It's on his birth certificate, Social Security card, passport, and all the financial papers." "I see," Linda Warren said. "Where is the birth certificate from?" "Memphis, Tennessee. Copes peered into the thick brown expandable envelope and pulled out the birth certificate, then laid it carefully on the table in front of her so she could read it. She looked down at it for a moment. Daniel Webster. He wasn't much like the original. No, he wasn't, Charlie said. What else have we got to work with? McKeegan said, The stack of regular-sized papers are the receipts from his deposits and monthly reports on how his investments were doing. They have the names of the companies and the account numbers on them. I think those might be the big things. There are also the ownership papers for the BMW and a Los Angeles marriage license with your name and McKinley Stone on it. Ownership of things he wrecked, I guess, Linda said. Charlie said, Guys, do you agree that we should make copies of the papers to work with and keep the originals here in the safe? We talked about that, Copes said, and that's pretty much what we thought. There's no sense in bringing in people we don't know we can trust and paying them to guard our secrets. Right, McKeegan said. Okay, Charlie said. Let's all agree on where we start. A lot of the money Max stole from my mother was in these accounts. There's a standard practice of all 50 state governments that requires that abandoned accounts be turned over to the state treasurer or similar official. An abandoned account is one that has seen no deposits or withdrawals or other activity for 3 to 5 years, depending on the state. That practice is called escheatment. Sounds like an excellent name for it, Linda said. Some states require the bank to publish the names of the account holders or do it themselves. Some states send a letter to the last known address, Charlie said. I never received anything of the sort, she said. I guess Daniel Webster Rickinger didn't have the same address as Max Stone. Which brings up our first problem. We have some bank accounts in this paperwork. Some, but only some, are located in the state of California. The U.S. Office of the Comptroller of the Currency says the proper procedure in a case like this one is to start by sending an inquiry to the Office of the Treasurer of the relevant state. So we start by preparing to send these inquiries. McKeegan said, Preparing to? What the hell? First, we need to establish in court that the late McKinley Lawrence Stone and Daniel Webster Rickinger were the same person, and then prove that Linda Warren, formerly Linda Warren Stone, was his wife at the time of his death. That makes her his heir in the state of California, Warren said. But there's no reason not to get the inquiries all ready to be mailed out while we're waiting to get this to court here in L.A. Since the Max Stone we knew was a very competent thief, I think we've got to ask all 50 states, Puerto Rico, and a few of the American protectorates. We should work out the procedures for Canadian and Mexican banks, too. If there's anything hidden in foreign countries, we'll have to work through local attorneys in those places. What's next? Copes said. We get started on the other assets. You said you've gotten in touch with some financial services companies that held stocks and bonds and things in Rickinger's name. As they told you, in 17 years, companies get bought out by bigger companies or merge or go broke or change their names and so on. When an account is actively managed, some stocks get sold and replaced by other stocks, or gold or bonds, or real estate trusts, or annuities, or cryptocurrency, or whatever. But every month the company will produce a report that says how many dollars the account's current holdings are worth on the market. Once we've established that Linda Warren is the owner of an account, we claim it. They will convert the account to cash and send the money. That's the rough description of the process. Any questions so far? Jesus, how long does this take? McKeegan said. Months. Years if there's resistance and we have to sue, said Warren. It won't take up all our time, but it won't all happen at once. We're starting by establishing that my mother is the heir, because once that's done, we can do several accounts at once. Are you two broke? Not yet, Copes said. The wolf isn't at the door, but I can see him just peeking at us over the hill. I'll get some papers done to pay you a cash advance on your finder's fee. I'll call you when the money is here. Does anybody have any questions? No, Minkegan said. Copes shrugged and stayed silent. Linda said, "Do you need me here any more?" "No, I'll have some papers for you to sign later in the day, but I can bring them to you." "Good." She stood up and turned to the two old men. "Thank you for finding these papers. Meeting Max Stone was the worst thing that ever happened to me. I hate remembering it, but it's been nice having some of my curiosity satisfied. Goodbye." She walked to the door. "See you later, Charlie." A few days later, Warren was in the Stanley Mosque Superior Courthouse on Hill Street, filing the papers to have the former Linda Warren Stone declared the sole heiress of all money and property owned by the late McKinley Lawrence Stone, also known as Daniel Webster Rickinger, his original name. His claim included copies of many documents, some proving that she was married to him when he died, and others that showed that he had transferred most of her money to himself before his death. The explanation was complicated, but thoroughly detailed and proven. It took 6 weeks for the court to approve the claim and declare her the widow and heir of the deceased under either of these names. Warren went back to his office that day and had the office's favorite messenger service pick up the box of letters of inquiry to mail to the treasurers of all 50 states, Puerto Rico, the District of Columbia, and several U.S. protectorates in the Pacific, asking whether they had possession of any abandoned accounts of Daniel Webster Rickinger. There were also inquiries to the Canada Board of Treasury Secretariat and Mexico's Comisión Nacional Bancaria y de Valores. Warren had already sent letters of inquiry to all the investment companies that had supplied Daniel Rickinger with proof of money entrusted to them. Warren had his mother sign papers allowing him to act as her attorney and spokesperson. Then he said, "Now that we've got that part done, it shouldn't take too long for the other states to answer. We can just sit tight." "That's good to know," she said, "but I think I'm going to do some exploring on the mainland. I want to visit a few places and see if one of them might suit me for a while. Don't worry, I'll make sure you know where I am all the time." 26. Daniel Rickinger, May said. "The letter is addressed to him, not to McKinley Stone or Stephen Wallace or some other name, and it doesn't say or current resident or something." "When did it come?" Peter said. 10 minutes ago. The mailman hasn't even driven his truck away yet. Do you think I'd sit here with this thing and not tell anybody?" "It's weird," Peter said. "I've got to admit that. It must be 15 years by now, isn't it?" 17, actually, she said. It cost her no effort to put the subtle combination of false sorrow and forgiveness into her voice as she spoke into the phone, even when she was upset. Her brother Peter had to admire it. May was always the one that their parents had been proudest of for her seemingly natural presentation. She walked back and forth across her living room for the 8th time, looked back toward the big mirror on the far wall, and realized she'd lit 2 cigarettes at the same time, and set one in an ashtray at each end of the room. She saw that the one on the grand piano was the longer, so she picked that one up, took a long draw on it, and blew the smoke out through her nostrils as she walked back. "Says it's from the state of Arizona Department of Revenue, Peter. The state." "That's actually good," Peter said. "Every time you register your car or they send your tax return, the paper says that stuff. This has got to be a computer thing. The name on his birth certificate found its way into their database the way everything does is all. They probably want to make him vote so they can get reelected. He won't be the first dead man who voted." "It says that the state took possession of money he had abandoned. That must mean he had it in a bank account. You know how you do. Take something from your pigeon gradually, convert it to cash, and then deposit it in bank accounts in another state under another name the pigeon doesn't know. The state wants to know if he's forgotten about his money, or he's disabled, or no longer living, or wants to claim it." "Does it say how much money we're talking about?" "No," Mays said. "I think it's like those lost and found offices. You have to say so they know it's really yours, and you're not just trying to take it." I assume we are, though, right?
Why do you think I bothered to call you?
I don't see how we can pass it up, May said. All through that period, maybe the time when he was in his early 30s until he died, he was making piles of money, and I doubt that he got any worse at it. Are we going to bring everybody in on it? Do you want to get killed by one of your own brothers or sisters? I don't. What if the state sent letters to everybody? Why don't you talk to Rose? We should probably all get together and decide before we do anything. I guess so. May said, "Call her now," and poked the red circle to end the call. Peter sat there for a minute on the big wooden porch of his lake house. He could never decide if it was the front porch or the back porch. The official front of the house didn't live up to the name. A gravel road through tall pine woods ran past a barn-like structure with a few stones leading to a block of concrete and 3 steps leading up to a door. This place on the opposite side of the house, where he sat, was 50 feet of platform outside of a majestic 2-story arching window, like a cathedral in the forest. Right now, while he was staring off at the shimmering surface of the lake, he saw a bass he estimated at 5 pounds leap out of the water 100 feet offshore to snatch an insect out of the air and flop back in, leaving a splash of growing concentric circles on the glassy water. A tall heron stalking along in the shallows watched the ripples glide to his stilt legs, then dissipate on the sand behind him. How was this not the front of the house? Peter was satisfied with his world as it was. If the news that May had told him on the phone had seemed to require anything risky or violent, he probably would have let it pass. But it didn't seem to. He also didn't want to provide May with an excuse to inject any poison about him into the rest of the family. She was a woman who had never had any reason to complain about anything, but just the fact that she wanted him to call their sister Rose was typical. She and Rose were volatile company. The Rickinger girls had both been born with genetic advantages that were amazing, the diamonds of the gene pool. He had gone to pay a visit to May only a few months ago when she was passing through Reno, and she still had all the attributes at 40. Tiny waist, an ass like 2 bubbles, breasts like ripe fruit, luminescent, wrinkle-free skin, and eyes that made men wish for things that they didn't know about a minute before. Rose was a different type, a couple years younger, an inch shorter, and dark-haired. She looked like a perfect little princess from another century. He looked in his phone for the number. Mrs. Dale Stansfield these days. He tapped the number. A moment later, he heard her voice. He had forgotten about their voices. They were soft and musical enough to put you into a fog when they could be heard by strangers. "Hey, Rose," he said. "It's Peter. If this is a bad time, just say wrong number and call when you're alone."
"No. Hi, Pete. We're in Chicago. Dale and his cronies are out now looking at real estate."
"They didn't hear Mother's rule about real estate, I guess."
"Don't take anything you can't carry when you leave?"
"That's the one," Peter said.
"It doesn't matter. Dale's too dumb and sweet to steal."
"Look, the reason I'm bothering you is that I got a call from May about 5 minutes ago."
"What does Her Majesty want from poor little us?" she said.
"I'm afraid it brings up a bad memory," he said, "but it's necessary. She got a letter today from the treasurer of the state of Arizona. It says they're holding some money from an account that belonged to Daniel W. Rickinger. They want to give him a chance to claim his money."
"Oh, God," Rose said. "That woman has a talent. Those letters are nothing. Dale gets them all the time. He's always building something or putting money in accounts to prove he's got enough to buy something. Now and then he leaves it too long. It's never been 12 years, or whatever this is. May says it's 17. I defer to her exact figures. Since I never cared much about him any more than I care about her, she's more likely to be right than I am.
You have to admit he was one cold, selfish bastard.
And speaking of Mother and Daddy's rules, How does May feel about him using her address and attaching his real name to it? I'll bet she likes that a lot."
Believe it or not, it didn't come up. I'm sure it will at some point. What she wants right now is that all of the siblings know about it right away. She wants a meeting of everybody where we decide how to go after the money.
Peter, look at yourself, and look at me. You spent at least 25 years shearing the sheep. You made enough money to go live in a fishing lodge or chalet or whatever it is. Relax and live the life you want. I'm the pampered wife of a very rich man who demands nothing more from me than to have sex with him once in a while. By the time I actually leave, taking a fortune with me won't even be stealing. By then the assets will be so mixed up even I won't know who owns them. Why the hell would either of us want to fool around and draw the attention of the state of Arizona?
I don't know if I do. I'm just being a good brother.
To whom? Me or her?
Both of you, Peter said.
She heard him moving around, and then he said,
"Hi, baby, I'll be off in a second."
More movement. "Got to go now," she said. "Bye." She cut the call, walked across the living room of the hotel suite, and into the bedroom she was sharing with Dale. There was a very comfortable reading chair that looked down on Michigan Avenue. She didn't want to use up any time on her brother Peter's regular appointment with one of his escorts, and particularly didn't want to hear anything. She only wondered whether she had succeeded in talking him out of going to the meeting about the late Daniel's money. The whole thing might be nothing, but she'd decided it wouldn't hurt to try and cut him out of his share. She sat there and looked down at the pedestrians walking along both sides of the busy street. They looked hot. Some of the men had taken off their coats, and a couple had even loosened their ties. Chicago could be so humid in the summer. 27. Warren opened the door of Vesper Ellis's house with the key she had given him on the day when the locks had been replaced. "Hello," he called. "I'm back." He saw her appear at the second-floor railing above the staircase, wearing a white terry-cloth robe. She waved. "Hi, Charlie." She turned and disappeared. He climbed the stairs 2 at a time and continued across the hall to the bedroom. "What have you been up to? Have you heard from my mother?" "She hasn't called. You'd probably have better luck calling her a little later when it's getting closer to dinner time in the Eastern Time Zone and she's back at her hotel." "And to what do we owe this?" He gestured at the bathrobe. "I did some yard work all morning, and then I was taking care of a bunch of business papers and things, and then I realized that what I wanted next was to take a bath. That was where you came in. How was your day going?" "I was downtown in court most of this afternoon. The judge in my mother's case ruled that the marriage between Daniel Webster Rickinger and my mother was a real marriage that was binding on him, even though he used a false name. I had submitted the license and a lot of photographs from the big wedding they had. I also submitted a lot of transfers as proof that the money they lived on came from her. I had interior and backyard photographs from different years and papers showing that the house they lived in was the one she and my father had bought. I even had some business letters Rickinger sent referring to them as Mr. and Mrs. Stone." "So you legally proved the late Max Stone was the same man as this Rickinger guy?" "Several times in different ways. The photographs of him were the same, as were the fingerprints from the old papers, the new papers, and the wrecked BMW. The medical examiner in Nevada and the police both had records of the prints taken from the body. He was also wearing the wedding ring when he died." "Does this end it?" "It essentially ends the part about the bank accounts in this state, and maybe any others we find that were turned over to other state governments. The evidence is so overwhelming we could do it all over again once a week. All that's left is going to be financial instruments like stocks and bonds. I don't know what that's going to be like. That's for another day." "She'll be glad to hear it. She wants to have as little to do with this as possible. What's next on your schedule?" "I have no plans." "Then you can share the bathtub with me. It's nice and hot."
Peter couldn't help feeling a bit uncomfortable. The lake was in a forest of tall pines, and the road was narrow and thinly traveled. That was good. But there were other houses only a couple miles from this area along the crest line of the Sierra Nevadas. Not as many as there were around Lake Tahoe, but enough. He didn't want any of the people in those houses to take notice of his visiting relatives, so he had told them different times to arrive. One car on that road was just some tourist who took a wrong turn. 2 at once was a parade. He sat at the window where he could see the road starting at around 10 a.m. The first one to arrive was May, of course. She had decided that it was necessary to transport her 125-pound body and a carry-on bag in a full-size SUV rental with oversized knobby tires designed for driving off-road. He was relieved when he saw Rose show up at 3:45 in a rented compact Mazda. He had Rose pull around the side of the house where her car would be obscured by the porch. He had gotten into May's SUV himself and parked it behind his boathouse, where its fat-ass gaudiness couldn't be seen from the road. He had already prepared the lakeside of the house to host his sisters. He had restocked the bar on the side of the great room. He had groupings of 3 chairs, each arranged in desirable places. The big porch overlooking the lake, inside in front of the 2-story window, and on one end of the long dining room table. Wherever they felt like sitting to confer, he had it ready. He had been careful to discourage pairs of people sitting without the third, because opportunities like this seemed to enable secret deals and conspiracies. The history of the Rickinger family did not inspire trust. Peter concentrated on showing each sister to the bedroom suite he had chosen for her, and keeping the alcohol and snacks plentiful and in plain sight. He didn't give any signal to either that it was time to begin the meeting. Peter felt nothing but dread about it, and he knew that there were more demanding personalities present than his. Let them decide when they wanted to take up the business. Beginning in late afternoon, the siblings sat on the porch, looked at the lake and the peaks, made drinks, and lied to each other. He knew that everyone had, over the course of their careers, made money. Their parents had prepared all of them for a life of taking what they wanted. They were all quick to see vulnerabilities and quick to exploit them. He was sure they all had enough to be considered prosperous, but these rare meetings were reunions, a chance to give the other Rickingers the impression that you were richer, smarter, and better than they were. As usual, he heard it all but didn't take it very seriously. If your whole life was dedicated to getting other people's money, you cared about money and thought about it and worried about it all the time. Peter had been just like them until one day something had happened to him. It was as though a circuit breaker clicked. It was right after the construction people had finished building this house and had driven away for good. He had suddenly realized he had enough money. For a while he wondered if it meant he was dying. He waited, but didn't die, because the event wasn't medical. It was mathematical. He had paid for the house and had no more desire to go anywhere else. He realized that he could afford to live the way he did now until he was well over 100, a point he would almost certainly not reach. That day, he stopped taking any risks to get more. He stopped caring about money, then stopped thinking about it. The way he thought about this transformation was that he had been cured of being Peter. As he could have predicted, the one who began the money talk was May. She said, "Let's see if we've got all the facts about Daniel's money now. I brought with me my correspondence with the Arizona Department of Revenue." "Correspondence?" Rose said. "Isn't it just one letter?" "No," May said. "It's been nearly a month since they got in touch with me. I felt I had to begin finding out what the procedures are and make their office aware that we're the heirs. I didn't want some deadline to pass before we even knew there was one." Rose said, "Did you give them all our names as the heirs?" "Well, no. I didn't feel I had the right to do that. They already had my name, probably because I live in their state,
So I gave them nothing and got some information. Want to hear it? Rose said, Uh-huh. They work out of a place on West Monroe Street in Phoenix called the State of Arizona Unclaimed Property Office. They have a website that tells you all about the process. If you're claiming property of someone who is deceased, just having the same name gets you nowhere. You've got to have evidence that you're now the owner. They also warn you that the process can take up to 120 days before you get the money. If there are stocks, it takes an extra 30 days. What is there? Rose asked. They won't tell you. You have to tell them. Anybody have any actual information? Rose said. Peter said, I do. May said, What is it? I got a notice from the California State Controller's office about 2 weeks after the Arizona people contacted May. I was pretty angry to learn that our brother Dan had used my name for some purpose of his own all those years ago and compromised my safety. I did what May did and let them know I was planning to claim what Dan left behind. Interesting that you never mentioned it to me, May said. I told both of you right away when I got my letter. You knew Dan was hanging around in California for years until he died, Rose said. That's probably the place where most of his money is. Peter said, Well, I'm pretty sure none of this matters anyway. Why not? May said. The only reason they got in touch in the first place was that somebody else had just filed papers to claim the money. That made them search the records for the first time in 14 years, and they found that he had signed something with his real name once and offered my house as collateral, probably in some deal. Now that everything is computerized, it surfaced. What a disloyal bastard he was. What about the other claim? Peter went inside to the tall wooden desk on the far side of the great room, lowered the front to turn it into a writing surface, and then opened a drawer above the cubbyholes and pulled out a paper. His sisters sat on the porch and watched him through the big window. He emerged and read aloud from the paper. On July 18th, the Superior Court of the County of Los Angeles determined in conformity with the laws of the state of California that the late Daniel Rickinger, a resident of the state, was married at the time of his death to the former Linda Warren Stone, now Linda Warren. She is the sole heir to his estate. May shot up from her chair so fast that it looked to Peter as though both her feet actually left the ground. "Shit!" she shouted. "Shit, shit, shit!" Her graceful hands were clenched into sharp little fists. "It looks like this was a waste of time," Rose said. "There's got to be a way around this," May said. Rose said, "No, if there was a woman he was still married to when he died, and she didn't consent in writing to his leaving his money to somebody else, there's no contest in California. It's hers. I've used that one twice myself." May said, "That explains something, anyway." Peter appeared between them. "Another drink, May? How about you, Rose?" The women ignored him. "Explains what, May?" Rose said. "Why you slept with so many old men. I guess now we know what that was about." Rose's smile was steely. "What was it about, May? It was about $46 million, give or take, and it wasn't a lot of work, either. When they're old, you're not expected to take part in threesomes or organize swaps or go jogging with them. You should have tried it while you still could." Peter said, "Since we're together all at once, we should consider everything we now know and think of an alternative. It doesn't sound as though this woman Linda Warren has remarried in 17 years, since she was called Linda Warren before she married Daniel, and is now too." Rose said, "Is her brush with Daniel long enough ago to make her lonely for male companionship again? Is she healthy? How old? What if she were to die, for instance? Would that mean the whole question of inheritance goes back to a clean slate, or are there a half-dozen contingent heirs?" May said, "Even if none of those avenues is a winner, I wonder if after she has the money in her possession, will she get careless with it? Lots of people who won some lottery a year ago are broke." Rose said. We could use Peter as front man, the strong, silent type who lives smack in the middle of nature. He's probably better bait at 55 than he was at 25.
Peter said, I'm not interested in telling lies to one of our brother's discarded women.
Exactly, May said. There's nobody a discarded woman will be drawn to like a handsome man who's not interested in talking to her.
Forget it, Peter said. I'm perfectly content where I am.
May said, let's stop wasting our time arguing about what the plan is until we know what the situation really is. We should sit down tomorrow morning in front of laptops and phones and find out everything about this woman, her finances, real estate, cars, living relatives, and anything else that comes up. Maybe, as Peter says, there's no way. If so, we will have wasted one day in his pleasant forest retreat together. We'll go home and sleep better than if we just let it go. Sounds good, Rose said. I'll take that drink now, Peter. Me first, May said. I need it for my headache.
In the morning, Warren heard the familiar ring somewhere in the distance and felt his new smartwatch vibrating. He looked at it. Who the... He was already on his feet and picking up the phone when he saw the number and tapped it with his finger. Hi, Mom. He heard her voice.
Hi, Charlie. Oh, I just noticed the time. It's 3 hours earlier there, but 7 is not that early. Of course, with the number of times you woke me up when I was in Hawaii, it could be justice.
Well, I am awake now. He went into the bathroom, closed the door, and said, How are you? Is everything all right?
Sort of. I'm in Maine walking on the beach. I've got a room in a big old hotel full of ghosts, and I'm feeling like one of them. The water is frigid, the wind feels like it wants to pull the hair out of my head, and I'm getting ready to pack my bags. I got a call last night from Glenn and Vivian Nostrand. You remember them?
Your tenants at the house.
Well, they got word from their agents that the television show they've been working on the last few years is going to be cancelled. They both miss England, so they began putting out feelers with friends at home in London, thinking maybe someone might be involved in a new project, and if not that, at least they'd put the word out that they were going to be free soon. It turns out they were at liberty for about the first 10 seconds of their first call. So they're moving out of the house at the end of the month when the show wraps, and then they'll get on a plane.
Do you want me to get a broker to advertise the house?
No, actually. I'm thinking about taking the house off the rental market and moving back in for a while. I'd rather spend next winter in L.A. than any of the other places I've been lately.
It's not going to be claustrophobic?
You know, that's an odd thing. Since you managed to track down the late Max Stone, a lot of those feelings have kind of faded. It's like old business has been settled. When Glenn and Vivian made me think about the place last night, I realized that I was thinking about it as the place where your father and then the three of us lived, not the place where I got hurt and humiliated and robbed. The good old memories were still there, but the bad ones weren't anymore. Besides, since you and Vesper are there, I might get to see you once in a while.
I think that's a good idea. You said something about packing. Have you made a reservation?
Yes. I'll be flying into LAX on Thursday at 3:20, American Airlines.
I'll be there.
That's very nice of you. I'll call you when I get there. Bye. He looked at the phone and thought about his mother. He had just heard good news. She had spent the years since he'd gone to law school, moving from one part of the country to another, like a person trying out each of the spots that other people said were the best. It was as though she thought happiness lived in a particular place, and she needed to find it. Now she was coming back to Los Angeles, returning to what he considered to be the real world. He should be thinking of this as a breakthrough, but maybe it was just another phase of the illusion. He stepped out of the bathroom, back into the bedroom. Who was that? Vesper was lying on the bed with her arm propping her head up.
My mother.
She says the tenants in the house here are going back to England and she's coming on Thursday, apparently to go to the house and take a fresh look at it. She's thinking about moving in herself." "You don't seem taken with the idea," she said. "She's great. Friendly, cheerful, loving, and never bothers you, that I've seen." "All true," he said, "but this feels a little bit off. She's refused to live in that place for at least 10 years. I can't help thinking there could be something else." "Do you think she's sick or something?" "I don't know if this is anything, and if it is, then it would probably be my own tendency to see a silver lining and just think it arrived ahead of the cloud." "Let's act on what we know," she said, "which, by the way, is all good." "You're right," he said. She got up from the bed and went into the bathroom, and he walked to the closest suite, where he had taken to keeping some of his clothes. He showered, shaved, dressed, and then went downstairs, where Vesper had begun to make their breakfast. She said, "Martha called. She said you weren't answering, and so she said she'd leave a message on your voicemail." He found the message and tapped his finger on it. "Charlie, the last of the answers to our inquiries to the state abandoned assets offices came in. The ones who have Rickinger money are California, Arizona, Nevada, and New York. Arizona, Nevada, and New York are accepting California's determination that the marriage was valid and in effect the day he died. The weird thing is that there were other claimants, and they're named Rickinger." Vesper said, "That is weird. I mean, the man was a thief, right? Aren't there legal implications to trying to claim money that's stolen?" Charlie said, "I hope so. But it's possible that in practice the only punishment for making a false claim is not having the claim validated. It would be hard for the state to prove that any claimant except my mother knew the money had been stolen." When they had finished their breakfast, Charlie went to the guest room upstairs, unplugged the number 3 burner cell phone, and pressed the number 1 icon. The phone rang, and then Ming Keegan's voice said, "Number 1. "Hi, it's me. Daniel Rickinger left money that was confiscated by the states of California, Arizona, Nevada, and New York. No other states. If I remember correctly, we didn't know about New York or Nevada, so he must have left the paperwork in safe deposit boxes in those places. That's good news. By now, the states confiscated everything he had deposited. The money should come through. It's pretty much a sure thing now that they've accepted the marriage. Is this just a progress report, or do you want something?" "I want something." "What is it?" "We just found out that my mother is coming into town on a flight from Maine to LAX on Thursday. We also found out that there were some claims to the abandoned money made by people named Rickinger." "You want us to watch your mother. Why should we?" "Because on the day we made our deal, you agreed to help as needed. My mother is that jerk's heir. In other words, she's the beneficiary, but hasn't inherited yet. If something were to happen to her before she does, I'm not sure of the legal consequences, but it would at least add years to the payout process for you." "What do you want us to do?" "I don't need you to watch my mother all the time. Just be aware of roughly what she's doing. Check her surroundings to be sure nobody is stalking her. I'll be doing the same." "All right. We'll do it." On Thursday afternoon, when he was at the airport picking up his mother, Charlie spotted Minkeegan and Copes in different places. Copes was in a car in the short-term parking structure across from the American Airlines terminal. Minkeegan was sitting in the coffee shop that arriving passengers passed on their way to the baggage claim. Linda Warren didn't appear to notice either man. She was too interested in talking with Charlie and Vesper, who had come to pick her up at the airport and take her to Vesper's house to spend the first few nights while she waited for her tenants, Glenn and Vivian, to clear out of the Warren family home. The next night, Linda invited Vivian and Glenn out to dinner to congratulate them on their new job in England. Part of her motive was her extensive experience of moving from place to place. She knew that by the time a person was this close to moving, groceries were intentionally depleted to nearly nothing, and she wanted to be sure they were well fed.
Within the next few days, Linda had begun to reconnect with friends she had seldom seen in recent years. 3 of them got together almost immediately and nominated her for membership in their country club. Groups of this sort were something Linda had never joined during her years in Los Angeles, but in some of her other places, she had found joining anything was an easy way to meet people, so she kept it in mind. Part of her time she spent with Vesper. They went for daily walks and took each other to lunch. Vesper drove Linda to visit local places that Linda had missed, or that had changed so radically that they were largely new. Charlie and Vesper had been spending almost every night at Vesper's house, and after Linda arrived, it was every night. The day came when the tenants had gone, the cleaning crew that Linda had hired were finished, and it was time to go to the Warren house. The house had been so vacuumed, waxed, polished, and dusted, its windows so thoroughly cleaned, that it seemed to admit more light than ever before. Charlie watched his mother's eyes and her mouth as she walked from room to room. She looked very alert and attentive, but not unhappy. When they had been everywhere, she stopped in the middle of the living room. Charlie waited while she gazed at the ceiling. He said, "Well?" She said, "She wants a baby." "Vesper?" he said. "Are you sure?" "She told me she loves children, but you have to start by loving one. You've never seemed to me to have any interest in that. You never seemed to me to want to hold on to any of the women you date very long, either, but this time you seem more amenable to it. You're both in your mid-30s. If you don't want a baby, you should tell her. If you do, it's beginning to be time." "Thank you for telling me. It's part of the basic service package, and I haven't done much mothering for a long time." "You've been fine." "Thank you." She looked out on the back lawn, which was now shaded by trees that were 10 years older and much bigger than they were when she had moved out. "I guess I will move in, at least for the fall and winter." "Good," he said. "It will be nice to see you more often." Within a week, she was settled again in Los Angeles and appeared to be occupied with friends most days and following routines of her own. Charlie had shifted his efforts back to operating his law firm's core business of estate planning, divorces, and civil suits. At the end of each week, he drove back to his condominium to pick up his mail from the locked mailbox and to check on the place. His refrigerator had nothing in it but drinks and mixers. The cupboards held a lot of condiments, spices, and canned staples. When he was satisfied, he went back out to his car and drove the rest of the way to Vesper Ellis's house. One evening they were lying on the bed upstairs in Vesper's master suite, staring up at the ceiling, only the edges of their little fingers touching. He said, "So where do you think this is going?" He expected her to say, "Where is what going?" But she didn't buy herself time to think, so he knew she had already thought. She said, "Life has taught me not to make assumptions about the future or make demands on it. Right now, I'm allowing myself to feel how great it is to be with you doing what I'm doing. I thought about relationships sometimes when I believed that was over for me. I learned more." "Like what?" "I was married for a pretty long time, and I knew that he would love it if I was wilder, freer, but I never tried. I would think, that isn't me, or he'll think I'm stupid, or a woman shouldn't have to do that. After he was gone, I wished I had been different, thrown myself into the relationship more. It could have been so much better. I promised myself that if I ever had another chance, I wouldn't live my life as though I was just a passenger. I would be shameless." She moved her hand. "I like to think that I am." He laughed. "What about the future?" "I don't want to talk about that. Right now I'm feeling better than I remember ever feeling. I'm having fun. I don't expect it to last forever or stay the same or stay at all. I just told you I had learned not to demand that the future come up with some result." There's nothing wrong with talking about the way you want things to go.
Okay. Where I want it to go right now is for you to put your hand on my waist and pull me over on top of you. The next part of the future will take care of itself.
28. Maureen Abbott looked through her oversized sunglasses across the giant swimming pool at the two women walking out from under the veranda roof of the main clubhouse, carrying tall glasses with umbrellas in them. She stood up and waved, and both their sets of sunglasses turned toward her. Their steps took on momentum and purpose. They were making their way to the row of lounge chairs where Maureen and her old friend were taking refuge from the sun under a big umbrella. Maureen stood when they arrived and said, "Hi, girls. Linda Warren, this is Mary, and this is Wendy. Linda's an old friend, just moved back here from Maui." Linda stood too and shook their hands. All the women smiled and said set formulas with "pleased," "pleasure," "nice" in them, and the two new women moved one long chair closer and sat. Linda decided they were probably actresses who no longer worked, but had married men who didn't require much of their time. They appeared to both be in their late 30s or early 40s, had enviable figures and pretty faces, and were expertly made up, but they were inches too short to be models. Wendy and Mary were immediately interested in Linda, wanted to hear about the tragedy at Lahaina, then about her life, friends, and family, her impressions of the places where she had lived. They told her things about themselves, too, and gave the impression that they were pleasant companions who were always interested in social events or excursions. After about an hour, Wendy and Mary said they had to move on. They had to catch a plane to Las Vegas because they had dinner reservations and tickets to a concert afterward. When the two women left in a Mercedes, they drove for about a mile before they reverted to being May and Rose, née Rickenshire. While Rose drove, May watched the street behind them to be sure that none of the cars back there were ones she had seen in the lot at the club, or anywhere. They had to be sure that nobody who knew them as Wendy and Mary would see them doing anything inconsistent with Mary and Wendy. Mary and Wendy had said they were going to be heading for the airport because Rose and May were going to catch flights home.
"What do you think of her?" Rose said. "It's too early to tell," May said. "She's got some money, and I remember that when Dan died, the newspapers said he was traveling really fast, like he was in a big hurry."
"Meaning he believed he was on the verge of getting arrested," Rose said.
"Probably," May said. "The point is, when you have to make that quick an exit, it's almost impossible you've got everything. He may have left some of her money."
"He wasn't stupid enough to risk getting stopped for a speeding ticket for no reason, so you're probably right." Rose paused. "You don't think she's already been given the money from the banks, do you?"
"It's only been a couple months since the state sent the first letter, and say she did get a pile of money,
it wouldn't retroactively change the way she lived.
She's been drifting for, 10 years, and most people can't do that. You also have to remember that he wouldn't have been with her at all if she didn't have anything to steal. Do you think there's a way to get what he had and hers too?" May chuckled. "Remember what Mother always said when it was time to pack the car. It's the piggy who stays too long at the trough who gets butchered." "I think what the states are holding is likely to be plenty. It would be everything he had in any bank anywhere in the country, not just what he took from her. Getting that and then sticking around to pull a second scam would be pushing our luck."
"I suppose you're right," Rose said.
"I know I am," May said.
She knew that Rose was certain to be thinking about how to pull the second scam by herself, because that was what she had been thinking about too. "I'm tired, but I'd better get back tonight, or Dale will be pestering the women in his Chicago office. Do you think the next time should be in a week or two?" "About then, but we might need to set aside a few days because these early meetings should look like they're all just chance. I'll call you." Rose drove to LAX, returned the car, and waited with May, whose flight to Phoenix left first. Then she caught her own flight to O'Hare. The next time they happened to be in the club at the same time as Linda Warren was in early morning a week and a half later. They found her in the women's gym, finishing a workout on an elliptical trainer. They greeted each other warmly but very briefly, and then she went to work exercising with kettlebells. Mary and Wendy were at first unsure about what to do next because they hadn't dressed or prepared for this. But then Mary stepped up on a treadmill and brought it up to a trot. That left Wendy to go into the locker room to get a massage. Afterward, she happened to step into the shower when Linda went in, and they greeted each other again. Linda seemed to have formed a routine: aerobics, hand weights. After a quick shower, she put on a bathing suit and went outside to swim lengths in the big pool. All three met again afterward in the shaded patio area outside of the dining room and had lunch together. Wendy and Mary were both expert at giving impressions rather than information. Linda had become comfortable forming friendly relationships through years of talking with people she met in each of the cities where she had lived. She was clearly a person who didn't mind being alone, but she was also open to the right approach. For the next few days, Wendy and Mary showed up early at the club and performed variations on the ritual that Linda followed. This was not a strain for them. They had both made careers out of drawing the attention of men who were placed on the planet to be lured by women like them, and that had meant working to enhance and maintain their bodies with constant exercise and dieting. After 3 more weeks, Mary and Wendy had become fixtures in Linda's second life in Los Angeles. The three went to the beach together, hiked in Griffith Park, and on some of the trails in the hills, went to dinner at good restaurants. Linda learned from the 2 women that they had both divorced men who had been forced by California law to split the family assets evenly. Both husbands had immediately married the women they had been cheating with and had subsequently become richer than they'd been at the time of the divorces. Mary said she was glad because she hadn't wanted to feel sorry for that rat, and Wendy laughed and agreed. They were similarly philosophical and good-natured about nearly every topic. They had both married again, this time to men they considered improvements over the last ones. Charlie Warren and Vesper Ellis were at Charlie's place. They had been out to dinner, and he was picking up some fresh clothes for the week's work and checking his mail on their way back to Vesper's house. When he heard the burner phone in his right coat pocket buzz, he was startled. He looked at the display, expecting to see a wrong number, but the name was 2. He swept the green oval aside and said, "Hi." The voice was Copes's. "Hi, Charlie. We've been keeping an eye on your mother. There's only one thing, but we think it's worth mentioning. She's been going to a country club in the morning with a gym bag kind of thing that has a shoulder strap. She stays about 3 hours, from around 9, goes inside to work out, then goes outside for a swim, eats lunch, and then drives home." "Yep," Charlie said. "She told me pretty much the same thing." "Did she tell you she's got some new friends?" "Just that she's met a few people that she likes. Not much about who they are or anything. What's up? Has she met a man or something?" "Not that we know of. What we've seen is women. There are a lot of people you see once in a while. Only a few you see every day. There are 2 women in particular who come together most days, and they walk around looking in the main building first, and then outdoors by the pool, on the patios, at the putting green, and so on. Every time they come, they seem to get together with your mother." "Is there something that I should worry about?" "Not that I know of. We just wanted you to know we're living up to our agreement and keeping our eyes open." "Thank you," Warren said. "I appreciate it. Just remember us on payday." 29. May and Rose arrived at Peter's lake house together in a Kia rental car that looked nothing like the Mercedes Rose had been driving in Los Angeles for a month and a half. The truck delivering the 3 kayaks was right behind them. The driver pulled it over to the side of the road far enough so that a skilled driver would have a hope of getting a normal automobile past it. He got out of the truck and opened the back doors, then pulled the first kayak out onto the hydraulic lift, then the other two, and lowered the lift to the ground. He used a two-wheel dolly to move the three to the side of the boathouse. He reloaded the dolly and handed Rose a clipboard with the order receipt uppermost of the papers. She took the pen, signed, and handed it back to him. He got into the truck and began to back it up toward the last wide area along the road so he could turn around. Peter appeared at the door a minute later, beside a younger woman wearing a creamsicle orange tank top, tight white jeans, and short boots. She had both hands up behind her head, sliding an elastic band over the ponytail she was using to confine her blonde hair. She leaned close to Peter to kiss him, went down the steps, walked to the side of the house, lifted a helmet onto her head, started the motorcycle parked there, drove it slowly out onto the road and off in the direction the truck had gone. May got out of the Kia and went up to Peter.
"Is it my imagination, or are they getting younger?"
"Probably just that I'm getting older." He kissed her cheek. "Thanks to them, I'll have something to regret about dying."
Rose said, "Whichever one is on duty that day will pull your gold fillings and sell your organs."
"If she's any of the current ones, she'll have earned them. You two must know by now that you're not going to shame me out of being a man and liking the things that men like. Give up."
"We will for now, but only because we need you for the Linda Warren thing. As your male gaze-sharpened eyeballs must have told you already, we've brought the kayaks. We're probably going to be set a week from tomorrow, but we'll be in touch by phone up to the actual time. Can we put the kayaks inside the boathouse? They're plastic, so it won't hurt them to be out, but it would be best if nobody sees them."
"Sure. Let's do it now."
"By we, I meant you," May said. "We need to go into civilization and buy supplies, so they'll already be here."
"All right," he said. "Remember to pay cash."
"Yes, sir," Mary said. "You need any supplies for yourself and your lady friends? Breath mints, birth control, coloring books?"
"No thanks," he said. "See you later." As Rose was driving the Kia back out toward the highway, she said,
"Do you think he'll come through if we need him?"
"He'll be adequate for our needs. He's providing his lake house."
Rose said, "Do you know how many lakes there are in the Sierra Nevadas? 3,200. We could have taken our pick. Still can. There's another thing he'll be helpful with. Remember, this woman fell for Danni and married him. Danni looked a bit like Peter, if you think about it. The same type, tall, with those eyes and the earnest face. But he's better looking than Danni. Nothing against Danni. It's just true." "I know," Rose said. "It's also true that he doesn't want any part of this. He's been trying to talk it down since he heard of it. He's got all the money he wants, and apparently it's enough to keep him happy. He's out on his boat or hiking up here every day, and has a different little escort scheduled to show up every second day, and that's enough." May said, "I don't give a crap if he wants this or not. He's a Rickinger. That means he's got to help us. It also means that in time he'll get over this and remember he likes money, as much as he can get. Now let's get into Reno, buy the groceries and supplies, get them stored in his house, and head for the airport."
3 days later, the women calling themselves Wendy and Mary were back in the club in Los Angeles. They were swimming lengths when Linda Warren...
Let each note be a step inward toward calm. Enjoy this musical break before we continue. Thank you for your time and presence.
came outside in a bathing suit, slipped into the water, and swam, as she had been doing every day for 2 months. Wendy and Mary knew that Linda would swim between 10 and 20 lengths today because she had already done her elliptical, treadmill, and weights in the women's gym and was now mostly cooling off and relaxing her muscles. When Linda got out of the pool and dried herself with a club towel, the two women knew she would walk to the same space with the table under the umbrella. They knew there would be a psychological effect to her joining them that put her at a perfect level. She would come to them rather than having them come to her. That meant she hadn't been invited, but their greeting would reinforce the feeling that she didn't need to be invited because she was one of the gang. They got to it as soon as she had received a tall iced tea with a lemon slice and no sugar. Her pulse seemed to be about 60, and her breathing was around 20. She was calm, relaxed, and feeling good after her workout. Mary said, "We agreed weeks ago that Linda has proven herself, right?" Wendy said, "Sure." Linda said, "Proven myself to be what?" Mary looked around them, craning her neck to see who else was nearby. Then she said, "This is not something we talk about out loud. There are people you can go places with and everybody has a good time, everybody relaxes, there's a lot of laughter, but not so much that it's exhausting and your face hurts. Then there are others who can be perfectly nice, but none of those things are true when they come along. I'm not talking about whiners or complainers or people who don't do their share or something." "Come on, you know what she's talking about," Wendy said. "It's mostly mysterious. They just aren't any fun to have along." Linda laughed. "Yes, I guess I do. I hope you're saying I'm not one of those people." "You're the opposite," Wendy said. "We don't want to sound like the mean girls in high school or something. That's why we spend time with people before we invite them on one of our trips. This way everybody fits and there are no hurt feelings. We're going up north soon, to this beautiful small lake in the Sierras for a few days. We hike on trails in these incredible tall pine woods that smell like nothing else on earth and kayak on this glassy lake. There's a house. It looks like a ski lodge, and it's luxurious, but we cook on an outdoor grill. A stove, really. It's just a heavenly place to refresh and renew yourself, to think and talk about life and the things that matter. We'd like you to come with us." "I feel as though I just got a very high security clearance," Mary laughed. "It's nothing like that," Wendy said. "Yes, it is." "When are you planning on going?" Linda said. "If you're in, then it's negotiable, and you get a say," Mary said. "We don't have jobs anymore, and our husbands are used to us going places when we feel like it, as long as we don't miss some big occasion that matters. On a trip like this one, we drive up and leave on a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday to stay out of weekend traffic." Linda thought about it. She enjoyed their company and had not yet found much to occupy her time in Los Angeles, except the club, and going back to Maui still felt depressing. She had lost friends there, but also several people who weren't even acquaintances, just nice people she saw around or worked in businesses where she went. A short trip to a forest lake in the mountains sounded like a good way to spend a few days. "I could leave on any of those days next week." "Wonderful," Wendy said. "It'll be fun. Today is Friday. Want to make it Tuesday?" Linda said, "Tuesday's fine. That will give me time to pick up some clothes. Most of my play clothes are in Hawaii." Mary said, "Hiking boots and good socks, swimsuit, sun hat, water-resistant pants, rain jacket with a hood, and tops and fleeces as you like. Think about how you'll feel, not how you'll look. People are scarce, which is part of the point, really. It's hard to rest your brain when you think people are looking at you all the time." That afternoon, Linda looked online to find out where the best sporting goods stores were these days, picked 3, and went shopping. She managed to make it to all 3 before she had what she wanted. She expanded the list to include some things that were merely sensible: a compact first aid kit, sunscreen, insect repellent, a pocket knife with 6 blades and tools, a flashlight, a compass, a pack of 3 disposable lighters, and a water bottle. As an afterthought, she brought a day pack to carry them in. That night after dinner, she called Charlie. After the "how are you" and the small talk, she said, "I'm going up north for a few days next week to the Sierras." "What's up there?" "Tall, fragrant pine trees, mountains, a blue lake, a luxurious house that supposedly looks like a ski lodge, that sort of thing." "Who are you going with?" "You don't know them. 2 women named Wendy and Mary. I met them right after I joined the club. They work out about the same time of day I do, so we got to know each other. They're at least 10 years younger than I am." "I'd be interested in meeting them." "Probably not, but I appreciate your willingness. Sometime when it's in the natural course of things, you and Vesper can come to the club for lunch. I don't think I'm ready to have a dinner party for you two and them and their husbands, but I may get around to it. We're leaving Tuesday, so there's not really time anyway." "Can you give me a call after you get up there and let me know you made it?" "Okay," she said. "I do have to ask, though. You know I went to all sorts of places while I was living in other parts of the country, right? Europe, Asia, Australia, and so on." "Yes, but since then, you can get signal bars almost anywhere, and it's easier to catch me when I can talk." "Okay," she said. "I'll try to make up for all the calls I owe you." "Thanks," he said. "You can call me too, you know," she said. "That's true," he said. "I just may." The Mercedes arrived at Linda Warren's house at 6 a.m. on Tuesday, and Linda came out with her bag as Mary opened the trunk. Linda had looked up the distance and time from Los Angeles to Lake Tahoe, which seemed to her to be the general vicinity of their destination, and found it was 441 miles. That meant they would be on the road for 8 hours and likely arrive around 2 p.m. As she reached the car, she said, "Maybe I should take the first turn as driver. It's all freeway for the first few hours, right? You don't have to actually know the way until the end." "You're a great addition to the crew," Mary said. "Take the wheel. If you can find your way to the Golden State Freeway, the 5, you will have us pointed in the right direction." She got into the passenger seat. Wendy was in the back. As she lay down on the seat, she said, "Thanks. That means I can get a couple more hours of sleep so I can wake up charming and companionable." Linda hadn't spent much time driving in any of the places where she had lived in recent years, particularly on Maui, but she was still a good driver because of her years as a commuter in Los Angeles. She got them onto the northbound entrance and then onto the right strand of the tangled freeway as it passed through the narrow space between hills and gradually spread out and took several directions. She guided the Mercedes out on the right one and continued northward toward Santa Clarita and Castaic and Gorman, heading up the long state with the 18-wheeler trucks for Merced and Modesto and Sacramento. For 4 hours, Mary dozed off beside her, so Linda's companions were both unconscious. She was comfortable with the silence. The Mercedes smothered the road sounds and the wind, and it left her time to think. The solitude was preferable to the bright, mostly cynical chatter that the other two had learned in whatever their normal lives were. They seemed to have spent the past 15 years in cocktail parties, or the sort of dinners where the guests were expected to demonstrate whether they should be judged among the quick or the dead. She didn't blame them, but she wasn't surprised that they needed to rest in nature. The big thing that she had noticed about all the places out there in big nature, forests, oceans, mountains, was that they held long periods of deep silence. She had grown comfortable with that, partly because, once she had thought about it, she realized that it was a reassertion of the normal proportions. The world, at least in the vast spaces between cities, didn't need words and simply swallowed them. Linda had not transcended the human need to be accepted, liked, and admired. So she spent some of this free time thinking about ways to accomplish and preserve this effect. Often it was simply not talking too much or too little, appearing to like everything and smiling frequently. So she reminded herself to do those things. Wendy woke up first. "Hi, Linda. Where are we?" "Just past Merced," Linda said. "Wow, you've taken us so far."
"It's a start, anyway," Linda said. "If you see a coffee shop or gas station, make a stop, and I'll take the next shift." The rest of the drive was harder for Linda because the others were both wide awake and talkative. It occurred to her that she had probably made a mistake by taking the first driving shift because it created a difference in their bodies' schedules. She had driven for 4 hours, about half the trip. When they reached their destination, it would only be mid-afternoon. They would be alert, and she would be tired. They stopped for lunch at a Denny's near Sacramento. In a way, it made Linda feel more comfortable. They were two middle-aged women who didn't need to worry about money, but at least in this instance, they weren't going to be pretentious and hold out for an expensive restaurant in the state capital, where politicians and lobbyists ate. They were more interested in the practical and efficient. They were well-fed and back on the road in 40 minutes. The rest of the trip was increasingly interesting to Linda, partly because as they were moving out of the long stretch of farmland in the middle of the state and into the zone of mountains and forests, there was more for her to see. It was also partly because her companions were talking about their lives. Wendy was a couple years older than Mary. They were both very attractive and vain, but they were in a lighter mood today and willing to laugh at themselves. Wendy said she was having a hard time getting to know the controls on her new fitness watch. She couldn't make the watch give her credit for the exercise she got during sex with her husband. The watch seemed only to recognize footsteps and the motion on an elliptical trainer. Mary said maybe she should get her husband to chase her. Linda learned that she had been right about them. They had met in an acting class about 20 years ago, had gotten a few minor roles, most of them in commercials, and had stayed friends during the years when their careers didn't get better, when they'd married, divorced, and remarried, when they had been busy raising young children, and now, when they didn't seem to know what they should be doing, but knew whatever it wasn't going to be work. When they reached the turnoff onto the road to the lake, Mary was driving. Linda was attentive and curious, craning her neck to look out the windows on both sides, and then leaning back to look up through the rear window to see the tops of the trees, and then, when they'd gone farther in, to see the first flashes of blue water through the spaces between the pines. The place was as beautiful as her two companions had promised. The house was much as they had described. The part facing the road was a 2-story rectangle, but the part that faced the lake rose into a tall A-frame. It was built on a grassy bank right above the lake, with a garage on one side and a boathouse on pilings over a dock jutting out above the water on the other. The biggest surprise was the man who came out the front door to greet them as Mary glided to a stop. He was about 6'2", with blonde hair that was just beginning to shade off into silver at the temples. His straight posture made him seem taller, and his face had a sculpted look and a tan that made his blue eyes stand out. Wendy got out of the car on that side and hugged the man, which was a profound shock to Linda until she saw it was quick and perfunctory, and said, "Linda, this is Paul, our landlord for the trip. Paul, Linda is a stray person we found at our club in L.A. and recognized as a kindred spirit, so here she is." Paul nodded and smiled and said to Linda, "I hope your trip up here was pleasant." "Yes, it was, thanks." "Go ahead and hug her, Paul," Mary said. "Otherwise she'll feel left out." Paul leaned forward and gave Linda a brief, gentle hug, clearly only to play along, then endured a hug from Mary. Wendy said, "We've known Paul for years, and I'm astounded he'll still put up with us." Paul said, "Let me give you a hand with your bags." Wendy pressed the key fob, and the trunk opened. He slipped the strap of Linda's bag over his shoulder and lifted the other 2 bags and carried them inside. He carried them up the stairs and set them on the second floor in the hallway. "I'll let you sort out the bedrooms." He went back down the stairs as they were climbing up. A few minutes later, when the women came back down, he was standing in the big living room looking out the tall window past the deck at the water. He heard them come into the room and turned around. He said, "The keys are over there on the counter.
I'm afraid there are only 2 sets, but I can get another made and drop it off tomorrow if you think you'll need it.
Linda said, I won't need a key. I'm sure they'll let me in.
Wendy reached into her purse and pulled out a leather checkbook. She opened it and took out a check that had already been filled out and detached and handed it to him.
And here's the rent.
He looked at it and put it into his shirt pocket. Thank you. Paid in full. I'm going to go now and let you recover from the trip. If you need anything, you have my number.
Thanks, Paul,
Wendy and Mary said in unison. He reached the door and went out. The others were drawn in the other direction, toward the big window overlooking the lake. Linda heard him lock the door from the outside, then heard the garage door roll up, and then a car engine. She heard his car pull out, then drive off down the road.
What did you think of Paul?
Mary said. Her eyes were gleaming, as though she knew something. The look struck Linda as presumptuous. He seems nice. She said it with less enthusiasm than she might have if she hadn't been repelled by that look.
He's more than nice, Wendy said. She and I are both married, and I, for one, will never again get distracted by a man like that. That weakness was what obliterated my first marriage. But you're single, right? Got me there.
Linda said,
But I'm not looking for a relationship. Just a few days outdoors with the girls.
Okay, Mary said.
Who wants to go for a little hike? I feel like stretching my legs after sitting in a car all day.
Linda's mood crept up.
That sounds just perfect, she said. We've got at least 5 hours of daylight left.
Wendy said,
I think I'll just unpack and get a shower for now.
The walk began on the road, which almost immediately began to lose its stretches of asphalt and was left with a layer of coarse gravel, and then lost even that and became 2 bare streaks the width of a pair of tires. After a couple 100 yards, there was a path that veered off to the left through the trees while the road continued around the lake. Linda said,
Do you know where this goes?
Mary said,
It's kind of interesting. I'll show you.
They turned onto it, and very soon it was too narrow for them to walk side by side. It wound a bit to avoid stands of particularly big trees, and it rose as it went on, forcing them to climb an incline that made their walk feel more virtuous to Linda. The air up here was cleaner but thinner, and so it took a bit more effort.
Does this go to somebody's house? It seems to be pretty clear of small plants and things.
That's sort of 2 questions. Yes, it originally led to somebody's house. We'll be there in a minute. But I think it is and always was a deer run, or maybe elk. We've seen some on a meadow up there, so they've probably been here forever. My theory is that the people who built a house up there probably walked around the lake, saw the path, followed it, and picked a place where they could cut down some tall, straight trees to make a house.
When was this?
I asked Paul, but he doesn't know. It would have to be a long time ago, before building codes and things like that. Maybe even in the days when you could go to a wild place and just decide to live there. You'll see. They climbed another 100 yards and reached a space that was mostly flat.
There it is,
Mary said. They skirted the site. They could see an area about 20 by 20 feet marked up by large stones laid down as a foundation. Linda said,
They must have carried those stones up here from the lake. What do you suppose happened?
Paul doesn't have any real information. He said he's found old rusted nails, and they're round, meaning mass-produced, not the square kind that were made by blacksmiths in the 19th century. There's a stream bed over there that leads down to the lake, but I've never seen it except when it was dry in midsummer or later. Paul thinks it was probably either a fire, you'll notice there's no chimney, or maybe disease. If you got sick up here before there was a road, you'd have a hard time taking care of yourself. I suppose the winters up here are pretty brutal, too.
We've never been up here then, but I've heard they are.
They climbed up the trail for another 15 minutes before they reached the meadow Mary had mentioned. It was about the size of a football field, and Linda imagined that the vanished people who had lived in the house had probably seen the large open place covered with weeds and wildflowers, with tiny blooms, and thought they could farm it. There were no animals visible at the moment, but she could hear a bird call from beyond the first row of trees on the far side. "I suppose we should start back," Mary said. Linda looked at their lengthened shadows and said, "You're right." They walked back the way they'd come. At the top of the trail, just where the meadow ended, they could see the full length of the lake, like a blue shoe print pressed down into the mountains. "That's a beautiful sight," Linda said. "Nobody has said what the lake is called. What's its name?" "Blucher Lake," Mary said. "It's kind of ugly, isn't it?" "It doesn't do it justice, but maybe it's the name of that poor family who built the ruined house." They walked the rest of the way down the path to the road, and then the house. The front door was locked, but Mary had her key, so they entered. Linda could see Wendy through the tall window on the lakeside of the house. She was sitting on a long chair with a drink in one hand, and the other hand holding a cell phone to her ear. As soon as she heard them come in, she quickly lowered her hand and the phone disappeared. She got up and set her drink down, then went to join them at the door from the living room onto the deck. "I was just having a little drink now that the sun is sinking below the yardarm," Mary said. "Houses don't have yardarms, but I think I'll make myself an ice-cold martini." "I think I'll get a quick bath and come back for the drink," Linda said. She turned, went back inside, and climbed to her room on the second floor. Wendy had looked as though she felt guilty for making a phone call. Linda hadn't heard anything about an agreement not to use their phones, so she laid out some clean clothes on the bed, slipped her phone into her pocket, went into the bathroom, and dialed her son Charlie's number. The phone rang a couple times, and then went to voicemail. She said, "This is your mother. We've arrived safely at a place called Blucher Lake, and 2 of us took a hike. I don't see any other houses, and it's very pretty. There's one road that rings the lake. I'm going to send you a Google map, and it should show my exact location. I'm going to get a bath and a drink, and I suggest you do the same if you ever close your office. Love to Vesper. I'll talk to you in a day or 2. She sent the image to his phone and started the bath. In a few minutes, she was feeling better than she had all day. She dressed in clean clothes and then looked at her phone. She had set it on the floor by the tub in case Charlie called her back right away. She had an odd feeling about it. She was almost sure the others must have an agreement that they wouldn't use cell phones on their trips to enjoy nature. She wasn't somebody who liked rules, but she could see the point of trying to keep a trip like this non-electronic. She turned the sound of her ringer off, stopped the sound notifications, and then slid it behind 2 books in the bookcase at the head of her bed so she would hear it vibrate, but nobody else would. She went back downstairs and out to the deck. Mary held up her martini and then pointed to another stemmed glass on the bar across the deck. "I made one for you, too." Linda walked over to it and took a sip. "Perfect. Thank you very much." She sat on one of several empty chairs near the others. "And thank you both for inviting me to tag along. It's really a special spot. The walk we took was exactly the right thing." "I agree," Mary said. She looked at Wendy. "You should have come." "In a little while you'll be glad I didn't. The halibut is defrosting, the spinach and the baking potatoes are washed, and the peach cobbler dessert is already in the oven. I also unpacked, did an inventory of the meals for the next few days, got a bath, and locked the car in the garage." "Thank you," Linda said. "That doesn't leave much for us. I'll clean up and do the dishes tonight and cook tomorrow night." Later, when they'd had the dinner that Wendy had prepared, and Linda and Mary had cleared the table, done the dishes, and cleaned the kitchen, they turned on the gas fire in the center of the conversation area on the deck and talked while the flames coming up through the sand warmed them. The sky was as clear and cloudless as it had been during the day, and they could lean back in their chairs and see thousands of stars that were invisible in the city lights of Los Angeles. The other two women talked a lot about their children, but she noticed that they had little to say about their husbands. After an hour or two, Wendy asked,
Before we continue, we offer you this moment of calm, a chance to reconnect with your breath and your heart. This free audiobook was made with love. Est-ce qu'il est essential?
Oh baby, baby, could you let me know I'm on your mind? A girl like me is hard to find. Oh baby, don't hold back tonight. I know that baby, how your body feels right next to mine. All I wanna do is waste my time with you every single night. Alright, yeah. I love it, baby. Ooh, you drive me crazy. I'll give it, baby.
and about her husband. She said simply, I don't have one. I'm a widow. I think I remember you saying you had children, Mary said. Just one. He's the reason I came back to L.A. for a while. What does he do? He's a lawyer. What kind? Civil, the boring kind. It's good because I don't have to worry that he'll starve, but his job is to make sure nothing exciting happens to any of his clients, so he never has much to talk about. They all seemed to Linda to be tired beginning around 10 p.m., but the talk persisted for another 2 alcohol-fueled hours. She managed to avoid talking too long or specifically about herself or her past life by laughing when something one of them said was funny or particularly clever, and by reliable strategies she had picked up over a lifetime, such as mirroring the speaker's expressions. At midnight she gave herself permission for a sincere yawn. I'm afraid it's past my bedtime, she said. I can hardly keep my eyes open. I'll see you in the morning. Good night. She climbed the stairs, went into her room, turned down the covers of the bed, and climbed in. She moved the 2 books hiding her phone and looked at the screen. Her message to Charlie was there, and the notation said, Received. She plugged the phone into charge and slipped it under her pillow. 30. Charlie Warren's life had been much better since he had finished Vesper Ellis's case. He slept later in the mornings. The final hour of sleep on most days was spent in dreams that were thinly disguised versions of reality, in which he studied problems and tried to devise solutions to them. This morning, a motorcycle roared past on the street behind the house, and he sat up. Vesper turned in his direction and squinted at him. What's wrong? I just had a dream about my mother. It might be worth taking an ambulance to the psychiatrist's office. A good idea, but I think not this time. He took his phone off the side table, looked at the screen, scrolled down, and read his way through it. She sent me a Google map showing her GPS location. I think I'll fly up. I guess Reno is probably closest. Rent a car, maybe check on her, just to be sure. Vesper studied him. It was understandable that some deep-seated memory of the con man marrying his mother and taking her money might have been shaken loose by the unexpected appearance of the 2 old convicts with the rest of the story. He had just spent time tracking down and filing claims to the crook's bank deposits. There was also the fact that he was probably experiencing a natural reaction to the violence that they had just been through during her own case. She said, Buy 2 tickets. You want to go too? Yes, she said. This is probably an unnecessary trip. If it is, then I promise that you will have a better time in a Reno hotel with me than without me. If it turns into an emergency, I will try to be helpful. I'm really good at things like calling the police. He looked at her and shrugged. 2 tickets it is. May and Rose were up early, sitting on the deck drinking coffee as dawn broke. May said, I really had hopes that Peter would do the trick. I thought that she'd spend a few minutes near him and the rest would be like automatic pilot. He could string her along a little until she inherited Danny's bank accounts, with everything legal and simple, with her stupid son or one of his lawyer friends doing the work. Peter may not want to play the game anymore, but he still knows the moves. He's still got the charisma, and he's in great shape, and he's so calm and reassuring everybody trusts him. I figured he could get her to invest in a joint project, maybe some land up here or anything else she likes, with him as managing partner. Well, she didn't go weak in the knees, Rose said. She's been burned before. That's what gave me the most hope, May said. The ones who have been taken are the easiest ones to take again. All you need is fresh bait. Well, it's not going to happen, Rose said. Want to give up or go with a second plan? I don't give up. I think we have to go with the risky option. She hasn't got Danni's money yet. If she dies and the money shows up in her bank account, then we have a few days writing checks on it and using her cards until the last minute. I've got a few addresses where we can have merchandise sent, and a few contacts with companies that can accept payments and move the money through a chain of other companies in under 1 second, when it all dissolves into the air in another country. I'm sure you still have some too. Of course, Rose said. They take a percentage, but losing a percentage is better than losing it all. Let's get some of these people notified today before we start the clock running. I'll make some calls this morning to set up what I can. You'd better do it too. We have no idea how big Danni's stash is, and it's got to go fast. May said, I already started a few hours ago. Manaus is 3 hours ahead of us, and London is 8. At noon, Charlie and Vesper's plane landed in Reno, and they walked through the long accordion tunnel into the airport. Charlie reached into his carry-on bag and turned on his 2 phones as they walked. The burner phone rang right away. He saw that the number of his caller was 2. Hello? Hi, Charlie. Warren recognized the voice of McKeegan. Hi, what's up? We lost track of your mother. Don't worry, we know where she is. Where are you? We're outside the club where she goes for her workouts. Usually, about this time she comes out of the gym, swims a while, and then eats lunch with her best buddies. She's a no-show, and so are they. She sent me an email last night. She's with the 2 friends at a lake in the Sierras. Vesper and I flew up this morning, so you don't have to worry about her for a while. I'll call you if I need you again. Look, Charlie, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable about this. We're all waiting for some big money to arrive for her, and we know other people have applied for it too. Anybody who's trying to claim this particular guy's bank accounts knows that the front runner has got to be the guy's widow. What's wrong? Don't I seem worried enough about her? I don't know, McKeegan said. Just don't lose our numbers. Thanks, Charlie said. I'll keep this dedicated phone with me. I'll also call you when I know anything new about the decision on the money. Charlie and Vesper rented a car and checked in at the Peppermill, partly because it was near the airport and easy to find. He kept checking his phone while they were eating lunch in one of the hotel's restaurants. He saw the way Vesper was watching him and slipped it into his pocket. I'm just checking for updates. I understand, she said. You could tell her we're here and available if she needs us. She would be insulted. She would act insulted. She would be touched, and maybe pleasantly amused at us. And if she is, who cares? You're one of the toughest people I've ever met. You can take all the teasing she can come up with. I'll let her know we're here. He smiled. Of course, I'll lie to her about why we came. He typed in her number on his phone and then typed in a text message. Then he put the phone in his pocket. Thanks. I actually feel less anxious. She can laugh at me all she wants. That's the right attitude, Vesper said. They finished their lunch and went up to their room. Charlie called Martha. Hi, it's me, he said. We're in Reno. Anything going on that I should know about? He put the phone on speaker and set it down on the side table by the bed. Not you personally, but as Vesper's attorney, yes. The last of her money came in from Founding Fathers. It tops off the balance, so I believe that's the end of her case. Vesper said, Thanks, Martha. Thanks, Martha, Warren said. If you don't have to be there, feel free to reroute the calls to the service and take the rest of the day. Thanks. Not sure if I will, but I might unless things get exciting around here. Linda Warren was third in the file as the three women walked along beside the road that circled the lake. They stayed on the shoulder of the road because there were ruts in the surface that had been filled with gravel, where a hiker's feet would sink an inch or two, and walking became difficult. The best places to walk were the flat stretches where the pine needles that had fallen from the tall trees were thick enough to prevent brush from growing up and presenting an obstacle to progress. She loved walking along the lake. She wondered about Wendy and Mary. They had both been up when Linda had come downstairs early in the morning, both staring at their phones in the pre-dawn darkness. It occurred to Linda that this might be the time of day set aside for communicating with their families. She also wondered if she had accidentally discovered that the two women's relationship was not what she had assumed. Had they both been up because they had been sleeping in the same place? She turned the idea over in her mind and came to no conclusion. It was none of her business, and it didn't matter to her either way. She'd been enjoying the trip and felt gratitude that they had included her in it. She had traveled alone to a great many destinations and stayed to live in several of them, but had never gone alone to a place where she was far from a good restaurant, a grocery store, and a hospital. Wendy and Mary were talking about how the three should spend the afternoon. Wendy said that taking Paul's powerboat out would give them a chance to show Linda the entire lake. Mary said that the boat's twin Mercury motors were loud and so fast that if they hit a floating log or something, they could all be killed. Wendy laughed. If I drive, then we won't have to worry. It's not funny, Mary said. It's not some wild product of my imagination. If we hit something at 50 miles an hour, it would be like doing it in a car, only without seatbelts or anything. It happens all the time, especially in lakes. They're the worst because they look the safest. What's your alternative? Paul's got 3 or 4 kayaks in the boathouse. I saw them. Wendy turned around and walked backward. What do you think, Linda? Linda said, I would say I'm more in the mood for the kayaks. As exercise, afternoon kayaking goes pretty well with this morning's hike. It works your arms, your abdomen, and your back, but leaves your tired legs and feet pretty much at rest. All right, Wendy said. I'm outvoted. We'll save the boat for a time when we're really tired or feel like exploring the far end of the lake. They kept walking, and Linda felt happy. While she had been living in Hawaii, she had thought about how great the weather there was, how beautiful the tropical landscape. She had almost forgotten how close to perfect the thinly populated spaces of Northern California, Nevada, and Arizona were. Here in the mountains, she kept moving her eyes and turning her head to try to take it all in. Charlie and Vesper were in the rental car driving toward the spot on the Google map where Linda Warren was staying with her 2 friends from the club. Vesper said, I can understand why they chose to come up here for a few days. It's an ideal spot for 3 middle-aged women to go and relax. If you want nightlife, you're close enough to Reno to put on a nice dress and spend some extra time and effort with your hair and makeup and drive there for one evening. The rest of the time, you can wear baggy cargo pants and boots and live the life of happy 10-year-olds trying to sneak up on the animals and take their picture or something. Yeah, I hope she's having a good time, Charlie said. She kind of had the wind knocked out of her years ago when my father died. She was young. It seemed for a while when she was with Max Stone, Daniel Rickinger, she was happy again. After we found out that he had just been using her to get her money and disappear, a whole part of her personality was gone. It was as though she decided to let herself be old before she really was. Part of it, I think, was that she was so hurt and humiliated. A man she had married had just been leading her on, not feeling anything for her at all. She felt like that was the verdict on her, not him. Charlie's phone buzzed, and he took it out of his pocket and held it out to Vesper. Here, read this, will you? I'd better keep my eyes on the road with these curves. Vesper said, It's a screenshot of a letter that Martha forwarded. It's got a big letterhead for the state of California. Dear Mrs. Warren, the state of California has made an electronic transfer to your account at the Bank of America of $3,876,484.36. This sum represents the contents of the bank accounts held by the state treasury for you, the widow of Daniel Webster Rickinger. It is up to you and your tax advisors to determine any liability that you may incur because of this transfer. Almost $4 million, Charlie said. And that's just California. And it doesn't count any money he may have converted from cash to other things like stocks and bonds or land or whatever. That's very nice, Vesper said. Should I forward it to her? I'd appreciate it, Charlie said. It might make her forget we came up here to violate her privacy. Done, she said. Still willing to do my job while I drive? Of course. Then will you please forward the letter to Minkegan or Copes, too? You mean to my kidnappers? Yes, Charlie said, although I like to think of them as helpful older gentlemen rather than semi-retired criminals these days. I want them to know that I'm not hiding anything from them. Because they'll kill you. Probably not, but I do like to keep things cordial and open. She laughed and kissed his cheek, and then forwarded the email to their numbers. Linda shrugged off the straps of her backpack and said, Can you wait for me a minute? I'm going to sneak off into that thicket up there and pee. Of course, Rose said. She watched Linda thread her way up the hill and disappear. She said to May, Now, she's gone. Rose kept watch from the side of the trail while May reached into the backpack that Linda had left there. She pulled Linda's phone out of the pocket and looked at the screen. Oh, crap, she whispered. The clock just started. Tear a few checks from the back of the checkbook and take a phone shot of the credit cards before she comes back. After a few seconds, May said, Got them. She stood up, sliding her flattened hand into her jeans to pocket her phone and the checks. Here she comes. May glanced up the hill and whispered, We can get started on the transfers tonight. Linda reached them and bent over to pick up the backpack and put it on. Thanks, she said. No trouble, said May. It's life in the great outdoors. They set off along the road to complete the loop around the lake. They walked a bit faster as they reached the part of the road that was fully paved again, and before long they were back at the house. Rose and Linda went inside and started preparing lunch. That gave May a chance to go into her room and hide the stolen checks and Linda's phone. As she slipped them into her purse, she smiled about the fact that she knew she was using the most secure hiding place in the house. An honest woman whose purse was robbed would never think of looking in another woman's purse for her money. She also knew that the way the schedule was shaping up, it was possible that she did not have to do this. By evening, it was very likely there would be only two of them. The women ate and washed the dishes, then went out to the boathouse to look at the kayaks, the double-bladed paddles that went with them, and the life vests that Paul, the owner, kept hanging on the inner wall of his boathouse. Then they went back into the house, changed into bathing suits, smeared sunscreen on themselves and one another, and then put on T-shirts and hats and went back out to the boathouse and put on the life vests. They pushed the kayaks from the dock into the water beneath the boathouse. Then, one by one, each climbed down the wooden ladder attached to the dock and stepped into a bright yellow kayak, holding tight to the ladder until her legs were inside the bow section and the paddle was in her hands. Linda's first impression came from a few drops of water that fell from one blade of her paddle onto her shoulder. It was how cold the water was for the summer. Back in the Hawaiian Islands, the ocean water was 80 degrees. Here in this lake that she could see across, the water felt about 50. She silently reminded herself that she was no longer in the tropics, and that the lakes in this part of the Sierras were very deep. She had read on her phone last night that Tahoe was 1,644 feet deep. Blucher Lake was much smaller, but she'd just learned it was deep enough to be cold. She would say nothing about it because it wasn't a problem, but even more because she was determined not to utter anything that could possibly sound like a complaint. She paddled 100 feet onto the lake, looked back, and waited for the other 2 women to paddle and catch up with her. She found it interesting to see a house from the water side. They looked different, showing the eye hidden aspects of the house's nature. It was partly because of the distance. The house and its relationship to the land around it could all be seen at once. This one was better than most, because she'd had a day to get used to a different impression. Linda began to paddle along the shore. The next time Linda looked back, Wendy and Mary were out from under the boathouse roof and gliding along at a good speed, taking long, rhythmic strokes. Linda was surprised at their course. She had assumed they would skirt their way along the shore, so that was the direction that she had chosen. The kayaks had a very small draft and could glide along in shallow water. She had been planning to stay close to the shore and get a view of the wading birds that might become visible, and the rock formations, and possibly even fish in the shallows. She had gone quite a distance along the shore, but they were paddling steadily toward the middle of the lake. It didn't take long before they were quite far from her. She altered her course to intersect with theirs somewhere out there, but she made the angle small to give herself plenty of time to catch up. The way the 2 had operated so far, they often planned small surprises that would impress or amuse her, the new friend who had never been to this place and would appreciate it. She supposed that this time it might be a spot near the middle that was the best position to see some particular sight, maybe a break in the mountain range that allowed a view of a hidden valley beyond it, or another lake, or even a city. If it was Reno, there might even be lights. Which way was Reno from here? She had lost her sense of position during this period when directions beyond this circular forest road had stopped meaning much. It took a while before the 2 other women stopped paddling. They didn't move toward her. They just sat, bobbing peacefully in their yellow kayaks. From this distance, the kayaks looked so small they could have been exotic yellow waterfowl. Linda didn't feel unhappy about any of this. Paddling around on a secluded lake was a pleasure, and the course didn't matter to her. She began to pay more attention to her technique, taking strong strokes that sent the kayak forward and kept the bow pointed directly between the 2 becalmed yellow spots ahead of her. Then, half-turning the paddle in her hands to bring the blade down on the other side while the kayak coasted, and make her left arm pull the kayak through another surge and glide, and then half-turn the paddle again and pull the right blade. The motion became more and more comfortable and automatic. She could tell that as her form improved, her speed improved too. Before long, she would be gliding right between Wendy and Mary. 31. Charlie and Vesper were in their rental car driving on the broad, open interstate highway. Charlie had engaged the voiced directions to Blucher Lake on his phone while they were still in the hotel parking lot. He had listened carefully and followed the instructions that the female computer voice gave him until he had pulled onto the main highway, and then it said, "Continue straight for 28 miles. Since then, the voice had been silent. Every few minutes he would glance at his phone to see if anything new had appeared. The map showed a white arrow extending to the top of the screen and turning right. It looked the same, but the numbers changed, counting downward as the car approached the turn. He said, "I'm sorry to drag you way out here into the middle of nowhere." "This is hardly the middle of nowhere," she said. "We're moving along a wide, clean, well-maintained highway within 50 miles of a couple fair-sized cities. If you don't hit a bear or get a flat tire, we're fine. Besides, I did volunteer for this. Well, I'm feeling a little guilty. As your mother pointed out, the mountains are pretty, the forests are pretty, and unless she's lowered her standards, the lake will be pretty. I like pretty places." They kept going, and eventually the female voice woke up. In 2 miles, turn right onto Blucher Lake Road. Vesper said, "There, see? We're right on track." "I guess so." In about a minute, the voice said, "In 1 mile, turn right onto Blucher Lake Road." Soon they could see a street sign on a pole, and when they reached it, they turned. The voice said, "Stay on Blucher Lake Road for 2.3 miles." The road was paved and began as a 2-lane asphalt surface. After about a half-mile, the stretches of asphalt began to be interrupted by an occasional spot where a sinkhole had been filled with gravel. The next half-mile included some longer graveled spaces where the asphalt was marred by long ruts. Charlie tried to keep the tires on the paved parts and out of the ruts, but as they proceeded, the gravel spaces became more common and larger. The next stage was when the asphalt had disappeared and there were only gravel stretches and strips of dirt road. Charlie raised the windows to keep the dust from getting into the car. He said, "I think this might be the middle of nowhere." "Don't exaggerate," Vesper said. "It's not the middle." After another 10 minutes, the voice said, "In 500 feet, your destination is on the right." It turned out to be true. After about 500 feet, there was a gap in the solid wall of trees, and they could see a large stretch of blue lake. "It looks nice," she said. "It does," Charlie said. He went on slowly. "This seems to be the road that leads around the lake." She looked at the map on his phone. "I don't know if I'd call it a road." He kept going. After a few hundred more feet, they came to a 2-car garage, then a house that at first seemed to be a large bungalow, but when they reached it, they could see that the 2-story plain part was only the front, and there was a tall A-frame roof behind it. And then, after the house, there was a structure farther from the road that had a dock leading out toward it. "I wonder if that's it," Charlie said. He kept going. The road improved for 100 yards or more before it began to get worse. He stopped. "What do you think?" "I've been keeping my mouth shut, being a mere volunteer companion and all, but I don't think we should go any farther. Whenever there's a break in the trees, I look across the next part of the lake, and I don't see any other houses." "Neither do I," he said. "There's some kind of a break up ahead. It looks like a trail goes up the hill to the left. It might make the road wide enough to turn around." Linda Warren's paddling was bringing her kayak up between the 2 other women's kayaks. She glided into the space and rested her paddle across her lap. "Well," she said, "just catching up was a pretty decent workout in itself." Wendy said, "I'll bet. I was getting tired just watching you." "Is there something out here in this part of the lake that you wanted me to see?" "No, but out here where it's sunny and there's a little breeze, there aren't any bugs, and you get the best view of everything," Mary said. She took a stroke with her paddle and glided closer to Linda. "Well, it's certainly a great view, I'll give you that," Linda said. She was feeling a mild irritation with the others, but as she thought about why, that she had wanted to explore the shoreline instead of the middle of the lake, but that they had made the decision without speaking to her, it seemed so trivial that she dismissed it. Wendy took 2 strokes with her paddle and drifted close to Linda on the other side. It made Linda feel even more silly because, in moving close, they were trying without words to reassure her. She looked at Mary, and then heard a swish behind her as the blade of Wendy's paddle swung and bashed the back of her head. She actually saw a flash, and the force of the blow propelled her forward so hard her face almost hit her kayak. She sensed that Wendy's paddle would be rising to take another swing, but instead it jabbed at her like a spear and hit her ribs on her left side. Linda brought her own paddle backward to slice at Wendy, but as she did, she saw Mary. Mary had taken a hatchet out from under the foredeck of her kayak and raised it to swing downward at her. Linda reflexively lowered her paddle and changed the motion into a paddle stroke. She shot ahead just as Mary's hatchet chopped downward. The blade hit the hard plastic side of her kayak and bounced back, accomplishing nothing. Linda's mind caught up with the past 2 seconds. She knew that Wendy had hit her in order to incapacitate and distract her while Mary swung the hatchet from the other side. It was inescapable that they were murdering her. She didn't understand how that could be, but she knew it and knew that she didn't have time to wonder about it. She had already taken a strong paddle stroke, and her arms were in position to take the next, so she did, and she paddled fast and hard, alternating sides and heading for shore. She heard the sound of splashing behind her and knew it was both women flailing to make their kayaks move forward from a standstill to catch her. She had to fight this regardless of what her chances were to hold on to life. She seemed to have nothing to preserve her but whatever her body could do at this moment of this day. It was going to have to be enough. Over a mile away, Charlie Warren drove up to the house and stopped. He turned off the engine and walked to the front door. He pressed the button beside it and heard the doorbell ringing. This was the only building that he and Vesper had seen since well before they'd left the interstate and driven to Blucher Lake. The doorbell seemed to be ringing from at least 3 places in the house. Whoever owned the place must be concerned that he never miss any visitors. Maybe nobody lived here all the time, and he was just a landlord who didn't like waiting for tenants to admit him to his property. Charlie was sure anyone inside must have heard the bell, but after he'd waited for about 30 seconds, he rang the bell again. He waited, then knocked. His mother had told him she and her friends were here for the lake and the woods, and those weren't in the house. He walked back to Vesper and leaned close to her open window. "I don't think they're here. They're probably out enjoying nature." "Of course," she said. "It's a long way to come to sit in a house." "I'm starting to think this wasn't a good idea. I emailed her that we were up here, and she didn't invite us to stop by, and we've never even met the other 2 women. I think we should just keep going the way we were headed and drive back to Reno. She knows she can call me." "Maybe," Vesper said. "Sometime we can tell her we came all the way here, got embarrassed, and sneaked off. It'll make a good story." He chuckled. "It is kind of funny." "It will be anyway," Vesper said, "after it's over and well behind us. Before I laugh, I'd at least like to be sure the 2 who've never seen us don't think we're criminals and call the police." "Or shoot us," he said. "Not funny," she said. "Too soon after that night in your office. Please, just call her." He took out his phone and pressed his mother's number, then listened, but there was no answer. "Hi," he said. "It's just me, your favorite son. I'll try you again later. I hope you're having fun." He shrugged and put the phone away, then looked at the house. "I'd at least like to look around for a minute to see if they're right nearby," he said. Then started walking along the front of the house toward the boathouse. Vesper got out of the car, shut the door, and trotted to catch up. They turned the corner and walked toward the back of the house and the lake shore. The house reminded Charlie of an open treasure chest. The front of the place looked like a shoebox-shaped cottage. In the back was a section that rose up to form a glass-fronted living room, with stylish furniture, polished wood floors, Persian rugs, and paintings on the walls. It opened onto a large wooden deck with stainless steel gas stove, wet bar, and the best view of the lake that he'd seen. "Look," Vesper said, and pointed. Far off down the lake there were bright yellow specks moving from about midway to the shore on his left. 2 of them were close together, and another seemed to be leading them. He hadn't seen any other human beings or signs of them besides this house and the neglected road. "Are those boats or what?" he said. "They're too slow to be jet skis, but they seem about that size." "I think you're right, but it's hard to judge size or speed from this distance. Whatever they are, there are 3 of them. It could be my mother and her friends." "That's what I was thinking," she said. "If so, they'll end up here at some point." "Unless this is the wrong house," he said. "I'd like to see if driving the road in that direction gets us close enough to see. What do you think?" She said, "At least it's a plan, and I don't have one, so that's the plan." They walked back around the house to the front and got into the car. Linda Warren was paddling at a rate that made her arms and hands strain to reach forward an extra inch and drag the blade backward another extra inch. Each stroke made her kayak roll from side to side a little bit, and she fretted because any lapse in form would take some of the speed away. Her ears were tuned only to the splashes of the other women's paddles, trying to judge how near the sounds were coming from and how rapid the repetitions were without stopping paddling to look behind her. Everything else in her mind was like sights barely glimpsed from the seat of a speeding car. Nothing could be thought through or verified, because all of it was so horrible that if it was true, she had only seconds to live and had to paddle harder. Had Mary really tried to kill her with a hand axe? Instead of an answer, her mind told her that enough wounds could look like the blade had been the propeller of a motorboat. The image was worse somehow than just dying, and it made her determination and her will to ignore the strain and discomfort stronger. She heard one of the women, Mary, it sounded like, shout at her, "Wait, Linda! It was only a joke!" She felt her chest swell with hope because the voice had come from farther back than she would have feared, and Mary had just wasted a couple precious breaths shouting nonsense. She was beating them. She was approaching the margin of reedy shallows near the shore now, and she looked for a clear place to land. She had to be on dry ground before either of the others, so they couldn't get ashore and ready themselves to attack her together as she arrived. She was taller and lankier than the others, and she sensed that she could outrun them if she could get a start on them. She suspected that they were thinking the same thing, so she aimed the bow of her kayak straight into the reeds and tried to go faster. The kayak glided into the reeds, and she heard the silky whisper of them sliding along the sides and bottom of it. She paddled against the weeds until her kayak stopped, then got out and splashed to the low, pebbly shore up onto the level ground, already veering to the right, away from the house, and began to run. As Charlie drove beyond the house and the road began to curve gradually to the right, he noticed again that the pavement almost immediately seemed older and less cared for. It seemed likely that the contractors who had built the house had needed to improve and maintain the section from the intersection with the interstate highway as far as the house well enough and long enough so their trucks and earth-moving equipment wouldn't get mired in mud or tip over. That must have been expensive. Maybe more expensive than constructing the buildings. The portion of the road beyond it that circled the lake was another matter, and it obviously dated from an earlier time. The car bounced along over bumps that may have been caused by almost anything, buckled sheets of pavement, the old roots of vanished trees, or underground rocks that were slowly becoming outcroppings. There were potholes deep enough to jar a driver's jaw when a tire hit one. Before Charlie had driven a quarter mile, he had gotten out of the car twice to see whether a tire had gone flat or been knocked out of alignment. After the third time, he opened the driver's side door and leaned in. He said, "You know what I'm thinking?" Vesper said. "Is it what happens if the car stops working?" "That's right," he said. He looked into the forest that began only feet from the road, then back in the direction they had come from, then back at her. "I don't relish the idea of backing up to where we started, but if we have to, I'd rather do it in daylight than after dark." "Agreed," Vesper said. "If it will help, I can walk along behind the car and direct you away from the holes and ruts." "That's very generous, but it's a last resort. I want to go forward for another few minutes and see if we can find a place to turn around. If we don't find one in, say, 10 minutes, we'll start backing out." "Okay," she said. They moved ahead slowly, trying to find a good spot, but noted only that the road was beginning to disappear, replaced by a stretch of pebbly beach. Then, after about 10 minutes, there it was. The road was now impossible to see, and the pebbles were replaced by a flat shelf of slate-gray stone. It looked slippery and slightly tilted, but it jutted several feet out from shore, widening the space by that much. Charlie stopped the car and walked to the shelf to examine it. Vesper came with him. "This looks like it," she said. "Let's try it. I'll turn to the left, back up, and keep going as far as I can. You stand over there, not on the rock surface, but beyond where the bank is pebbly, and stop me if I'm backing out too far."
Just be sure you can see me in your mirrors, and I'll keep you out of the lake." Warren got into the car, moved it onto the rock, and turned it to the left as sharply as he could, inching along until the grill came within inches of a tree. He turned the wheel all the way to the right and backed up until he saw Vesper waving her arms and shaking her head, then went forward again. It took them 3 back-and-forth cycles, but they ended up with the car facing the end of the lake where the house was. He got out of the car and joined Vesper. "Well, that's a relief," she said. "It sure is," he said. He saw that Vesper had returned her attention to the lake. She was staring into the distance, and after a moment her face looked puzzled. Warren stepped out a few paces on the stone shelf, trying to follow her gaze. "Do you see something?" "No," she said. "That's the point. I mean, I see it, but it's different. I only see 2 of those yellow boats, or canoes, or whatever they are." Warren said, "It looks like they're going the other way." The 2 yellow kayaks were close together, and the 2 sisters were paddling steadily, their eyes on the edge of the tall pine forest above the bank, trying to be sure they didn't miss the next glimpse of Linda Warren. She was a strong runner, and she moved faster than the 2 women could paddle a kayak. Every time May thought Linda must be exhausted by now and ready to collapse and rest, either she or Rose would catch a flash of white skin with a blue bathing suit between 2 trees above the shore, always lasting only long enough for the mind to verify what the eye had seen, and then gone again. Each time the sight was farther away. Rose said, "I think she's still building her lead on us." "It can't go on much longer," May said. "We hiked all morning and then paddled, and now she's been running for at least a mile. She's got to stop." "I know, and we're still just sitting and paddling and getting less tired. This time when we catch up, she's going to be too weak to fight." "If you hadn't—" "Stop. I'd advise you to shut up," Rose said. "If you want to play that, I can go on with it just as well as you can. If you had been so great, it wouldn't matter what I did. You'd have killed her without me." "Look," May said. "Did you see her that time?" "No. She's still running. I think we've got to head over that way and cut her off before she reaches the curve. If she keeps going straight from there, she could reach the interstate and flag somebody down. Then we'll be the ones who are in trouble." Linda was keeping herself moving by walking 20 steps to catch her breath and then running 40, walking 20, running 40. She had not formed a clear enough plan to stick to yet. Getting to shore and running had kept her alive so far. She was well ahead of the 2 women, but at some point she was going to have to make a decision. Nothing in her life had prepared her for anything like this, except keeping fit maybe. But now she had to choose. She began to climb higher up the hill to get deeper into the woods, and then she turned to cut back toward the house. As she moved along under the trees, other parts of her plan began to form and add themselves to it. She had no key to the house, but there were rocks around it, some the size of a fist, and a few as big as a brick. She would break a window, get inside, find her phone, and call 911. Then she would do a quick search for weapons, checking now and then to see where the yellow kayaks were on the lake. If Paul didn't own a firearm, or it was locked up, she could at least take a kitchen knife or 2. She could stuff a few necessities into her bag and head into the woods again, this time along the road to the interstate highway. The police would have to come from that direction, and maybe she could meet them on the way. Charlie and Vesper walked along the lake quickly, always aware of the positions of the kayaks. They had still not thought of a satisfactory reason why they could only see 2. Could one of the women have come ashore and walked back to the house? No. They would have met her on their way. And where was the kayak? Had it sunk? That didn't strike either of them as possible. Didn't they have buoyancy built in? Neither wanted to ask these questions aloud. Then, as they reached a spot where the shore curved to reveal a large patch of reeds, they saw a straight line through it where the reeds had been pushed apart. At the end of the line was a yellow kayak. Charlie and Vesper ran to it. The kayak's bow was up against the bank, as though someone had plowed through the reeds until it hit the shore. Charlie stopped and knelt to look at it closely, leaning forward to stare at the stern section without touching anything. It was what he thought he had seen. The discoloration was a smattering of drops, most of them extending down the sides into streaks. "Blood," he said. "Somebody is hurt." He looked down into the hollow where the occupant had been. More blood inside it. There was also a deep mark just behind the seat on the outside, as though something had hit it. "Oh, my God," Vesper said. "Maybe the other two are taking the hurt one across the lake to get her help." "I hope so. I'm going to call 911. "I think we have to," she said. He dialed his phone and heard about 10 rings before he heard, 911, what is your emergency?" "I'm on the west shore of Blucher Lake, and we've just found a kayak left where the old road passes beside a patch of reeds. It's got what I'm pretty sure is blood on it and in it. Earlier we saw 3 identical yellow kayaks on the lake. The other 2 are still out there paddling away from here. We need police and an ambulance." "Your name, sir?" "Charles Warren. I'm a lawyer from Los Angeles, and my girlfriend and I were going to surprise my mother, who is vacationing here with 2 other women." "Please stay on the line for a moment while I dispatch the emergency people." "I will." A moment later, the operator returned. "You said Blucher Lake, sir?" "Yes, Blucher. You head north from Reno along the interstate about 28 miles, and there's a Blucher Lake road on the right. It leads only to Blucher Lake," Warren said. "If you have a cell phone number, I can send you a map showing the location of the house." "Nope, I've got it. One more moment." Warren waited. About 30 seconds later, the operator returned. "Mr. Warren, are you still there?" "We're still here." "The emergency crew are on their way. I'm afraid it will take at least half an hour for them to reach you. Can you stay and show them what you found?" "Yes." "Then you can hang up. I'll give you a call when they reach the lake." "Okay, thank you." Warren hung up. He said to Vesper, "I think the thing to do now is probably go back toward the house so we're sure the emergency people don't go the wrong way or something." "Hello, Peter." "Hello, May." Peter's voice was distinctly weary and annoyed. "What is it now?" "It's a mess, Peter. The state of California is wiring her Danny's money probably today, but maybe yesterday. We needed to put her down so we could drain her bank accounts. We went out to the middle of the lake in the kayaks. When Rose went to split her head with a hatchet, she missed, believe it or not. I smacked her in the back of the head with my paddle so Rose would get another chance. This woman didn't react like normal people do, Peter. She doesn't get paralyzed and stupid. She starts paddling like she's the kayak champion of the world. She heads towards shore, and we can't keep up. She plows right through a bunch of weeds, gets out, and takes off like a goddamned gazelle." Peter said, "Honey, this would be a really good time for you to go take that shower. I've got to finish this call." "You have a woman with you right now?" May said. "Jesus, Peter, it's not even 5 o'clock. "I'm living in a hotel in Nevada right now because you needed a favor. What am I supposed to do all day? Gamble?" "Rose and I need you, Peter. We're in kayaks on the lake. Linda Warren is out in the woods, and she's running. If she makes it to the highway, hell, if she runs into somebody with a phone, we're all cooked. I don't mean just us, either. She's met you, and she's slept in your house." Peter took in a deep breath and blew it out slowly. "I'll be there as soon as I can." He ended the call. He spent a few seconds thinking about what he had just heard. His sisters had not only gotten him involved in this stupid attempt to get Brother Danny's money after 17 years, they had brought the woman they were going to rob to his house, ignoring his reluctance and stretching the bonds of blood relations beyond any reasonable limits. Now they had tried to murder her. He rubbed his eyes as he sat on the bed, getting more and more furious at them. Peter had never tried to murder anyone. At first it had been because of stories like this. Murdering somebody without getting caught was very complicated and required incredible attention to detail. As he had gotten older and smarter, it had been because he just didn't care enough about money to do it. Now he knew there was a strong chance he was going to be one of 3 people charged with attempted murder and convicted. He considered just not showing up. As he got angrier, he even considered going to the police and telling them what was going on.
After a moment, he abandoned that idea. May and Rose together could certainly get the police to believe that Peter was the guilty one. He heard the shower turn off and the hiss of water stop. He went to the closet and began to get dressed. As he was buttoning his shirt, he heard the door open behind him. He turned and saw Tricia standing in the doorway of the bathroom with a big towel wrapped around her. She said, "You're getting dressed? Where are we going?" "I'm afraid it's something I've got to do alone, honey. I should be back by morning. I can pay you now if you want, and you can go, or if you'd rather just watch TV and get a good night's sleep, you can order dinner from room service. Just don't bring any other men to the room. That would piss me off and cost you a great deal of future income." "I would never do that," she said. "That's so sleazy." "I'm sorry I brought it up," he said. "I don't want to be offensive." He reached into the closet one more time and took a dark gray sport coat off the hanger. Tricia stepped close to him and hugged him, at the same time letting go of the towel. As the towel slid to the floor at her feet, she whispered in his ear, "Oops," and kissed him. As he pulled away, she didn't move or pick up the towel. "I'll be here." "I hope so." He turned and went to the door. As he walked out the door and down the hallway, he thought about how much he resented the living members of his family. Then he thought about the non-living members and noted that he hated them even more. He got to his car and pulled away from the hotel. He didn't stop until he could turn into a dark alley, open the trunk of his car, and retrieve his gun from inside the wheel well under the spare tire. Then he got back into the car and drove. He knew the best route and every curve or bump in the road. The place he was going was his own home. Rose and May were nearly to the eastern shore of the lake. They'd been paddling the kayaks for most of the afternoon, and their shoulders, backs, and even the muscles of their legs were sending pain messages to their brains each time they took another stroke. Rose said, "It's getting to be a pretty long time since we last saw her." "You don't have to tell me," May said. "I think she probably just ran as far as she could into the woods and then collapsed from exhaustion or hurt herself. I'll bet she's not more than 100 yards from us right now, probably with a twisted ankle or a knee injury." "I think so too," Rose said. "I think we should land at the last place we saw her, drag the kayaks up into the brush and go in after her. Once you're in among the tall trees, the branches start higher up, and you can see between the trunks." "Let's do it. We can take care of this, and then Peter can drive up the road along this side of the lake, put the body in the trunk of his car, and get rid of it." They paddled along the shore to the spot where Rose had last seen Linda, beached the kayaks, and then dragged them up between the trees and left them uphill from a large rock. They walked to the east into the forest, searching for any place where the deep layer of pine needles had been run through and displaced. They had only gone a few hundred feet before May said, "Today has been quite a workout. First the hike, then the paddling, and now this, whatever this is." Rose said, "This is finishing her off. You gave her a pretty good whack with the paddle. You might have given her a concussion. By now she could be unconscious. But let's be quiet so she doesn't hear us coming. Excuse me for mentioning it, but I'm very tired and my whole body is beginning to hurt." Rose said, "I guess you've just gotten too old for this. I hope Danni stashed so much money that your share will be enough to keep you from having to do things like this anymore." May picked up the pace, stomping through the woods above the lake so she could get ahead of Rose and stay ahead. They kept climbing the incline. They both knew that Linda's best bet was to make it out to the interstate and get picked up by a driver, and the most direct route was straight through the forest from the northern end of the lake, where they'd seen her running. But it was only a few minutes before Rose stopped on the hill, gazed back across the lake from their higher altitude, and called, "Look!" May looked and saw what she was pointing at. They could see the distant figure of Linda Warren running south along the crest of the hill toward their brother Peter's house. The two sisters moved quickly. They took a diagonal route down the hill to the trail that was the remnant of the road around the lake and raised their speed to a run.
Rose gripped the hatchet handle just below the head, and May pressed her right hand against the sheath of the hunting knife so it wouldn't flap against her as she ran. Charlie Warren didn't see his mother running at first. He heard her. She passed 100 feet above Charlie and Vesper in the deep silence of the late afternoon, straining to keep going. He heard her heavy breathing first, the gasps to bring in enough air, and the huffs to exhale it. Then he heard her steps, the running shoes landing flat on the rocky surface above the road. He and Vesper stepped out to the edge of the lake so they could see the top of the hill, and there she was. "Mom!" he yelled. "Linda Warren!" He gave a loud whistle and saw her turn her head, but at first she didn't stop. Her legs kept moving for 4 steps as though they had acquired an independent will that had to be overcome. She stopped and looked down, then bent over for 3 seconds, trying to catch her breath, and then began to make her way down the hill toward Charlie and Vesper, who were climbing toward her. When they met, she hugged them both at once. "They're chasing me," she rasped. "They're trying to kill me." Charlie realized that the urgent thing was not to talk. "Come on," he said. "We've got a car." He and Vesper each took one of Linda's arms over their shoulders and half carried her toward the spot on the road where they had left the car. As she recovered her breath, she said, "I don't know why. They just changed instantly and went after me out on the lake." "It's over now," Charlie said. "That's all that matters. We'll get you out of here." Linda half turned her head, and her eyes widened. "They're coming." The 2 women were on the road, running to catch up with them. Charlie handed Vesper the keys and said, "Keep going. Head for the car." Vesper looked reluctant, but she took Linda's arm and tugged. "He's right. Come on." They began to trot to make it to the car, and Charlie turned to face the 2 sisters who were approaching at a run. He stood where he was as they drew closer, but then he identified what the 2 women had in their hands. One was carrying a hatchet, and the other a knife with a blade about 6 inches long. As they slowed their run to a trot, and finally to a walk, about 30 feet from him, they separated so that they were advancing on both sides of him. The hatchet and the knife were no longer in sight. Their hands were now visible, so the weapons must have been tucked into their clothes. Was he imagining it, or were they both smiling? No, he decided, they weren't smiles exactly. They were expressions of eagerness. He called out, "Hello? I'd like it if you'd stop where you are so we can talk. Why are you chasing this other lady?" Neither of them spoke. They just kept coming, their eyes turning to exchange a look now and then. He realized the strategy was that one would sprint forward to force him to head her off. When he did, she would attack, or at least engage him, while the other would dash at him from behind and stab or hack him. He said, "You can choose to back away. I won't chase you if you do." They kept walking. They had a flexible strategy, almost certain to keep him off balance, while both attacked him at once from different sides. If they wanted to kill his mother and Vesper, they would have to kill him first, and they knew it. He wondered how long it would be before the police arrived, but he didn't dare take his eyes off them to look at his watch. He squatted on the shore and picked up 2 water-smoothed oblong stones that fit the palms of his hands. The 2 women reached positions on either side of him, each only about 10 feet away. They both charged at once. He hurled the stone in his right hand first because he could simply pivot and throw. His target was the woman who ran at him holding the hatchet high. The stone thudded against her just at the bottom of her rib cage. He extended his turn, passing the second stone from his left hand to his right and stepping to the side. The other woman was so close by then that he could hardly miss her. She slashed at him with her knife as he released the stone. It hit her shoulder, and she cried out, clutching the spot. He grabbed the arm and twisted it behind her so she dropped the knife. Then he pushed her away from him so he could pick it up and kept moving to snatch up the hatchet that lay near the woman who was lying with her arms hugging her ribs. He said, "Just stay where you are. There's nothing to gain by doing anything now." He stayed close by, watching them.
In another 5 minutes he heard his rental car's springs creaking as Vesper drove it along the rough road. When she reached the spot above the beach, she stopped. He could see his mother in the passenger seat, staring back at him. A moment later he thought he heard the same sound continuing, but the rental car hadn't moved. He looked across the lower end of the lake and saw that a police car and an ambulance were coming to a stop beside the house, and then a second police car pulled up behind the ambulance. Warren felt his cell phone vibrate in his pocket. He took out the phone and heard the emergency operator say, "Mr. Warren, the police and ambulance should be arriving. Do you see them?" "Yes, I do," he said. "They're here. Tell them to come ahead." A few minutes later, Peter Rickinger was driving along Blucher Lake Road. He reached the spot where he got his first view of the lake, backed up about 20 feet, and got out of his car. He walked close to the edge of the woods, stopped behind the thick trunk of an old pine, and looked across the lake. There were 2 police cars, one of them parked in the road near his house, and the other on the stretch of road on the west side of the lake. There was an ambulance on the road behind it, and the back door was wide open. There was also another car, smaller and white. He wasn't sure how to interpret that car. Usually, white vehicles belong to coroners, not the police, but this one was too small, and it didn't seem likely that the coroner could be here so soon, even if his sisters had already killed Linda Warren and reported it. Either way, it didn't change what he had to do now. Peter walked back to his car, got in, and half-closed his door very softly so the sound wouldn't carry, and then backed up to a spot that was wide enough for him to turn around. He drove out to the interstate and headed back toward Reno. Along the way, he removed the battery and SIM card from his phone and stopped to throw the phone out as far as he could into one of the lakes. Some of these lakes were so deep that he felt sure the phone would never be found. As he thought about it, he began to feel pleased. He could buy the newest iPhone tomorrow while he was in Reno. He wouldn't rush back to his home on the lake. He would wait a few days to get the call from May or Rose to let him know what had actually happened. Either his sisters had succeeded or they hadn't. At this point, he didn't care very much which it was. They certainly hadn't cared much about him. It was another half hour before he arrived at his hotel. When he had parked his car and taken the elevator upstairs, he was pleased that when he tried his key card on the lock of his room, the green light went on, but the door wouldn't open. After a few seconds, he saw the little peephole in the door darken, and then Tricia disengaged the deadbolt and opened the door. She was wearing one of the 2 big, fluffy white bathrobes. She kissed him. "I'm glad you made it back so soon," she said. "Me too." 32. Martha heard the outer office door open and looked up. She said, "Good morning, gentlemen. They're waiting for us in the conference room. We have refreshments in there, coffee, tea, soft drinks, water, Danish pastries, and so on." Then she closed the office door and locked it. "Follow me." She walked ahead of them into the conference room. Seated around the table were Charles Warren, Linda Warren, and Vesper Ellis. Charles Warren stood up and shook hands with Copes and then with Minkeegan. "Please take what you'd like to eat and drink, and then join us." Minkeegan and Copes went to the counter along the wall and took bottled water and pastries, then sat down. Copes said, "I've never seen a law office that was open on Sunday before." "You still haven't," Warren said. "This is a one-time private business meeting. It is now 4 months since the last of the claims we filed to get the money stolen by Daniel Rickinger, a.k.a. McKinley Stone. The final payment of the recovered funds arrived Friday." He lifted a loose-leaf notebook that was thick with papers and handed it to Copes. "In that notebook are copies of the documents from the Treasury Departments of the 6 states showing the sums of abandoned accounts that they were transferring to my mother, Linda Warren. The second section is devoted to confirmations of the transfers of investment accounts from his name to hers by financial services companies. The last page is the executive summary that we compiled. As of the close of markets on Friday, The total amount recovered was $16,482,361.04. The investments have been converted to cash. So what do we get? Keegan said. And when? Your share will be broken up into parts. You've each been paid electronically $1 million. We checked this morning to see if it was posted in the holding account. The money is officially a fee for finding the Rickinger papers, researching them, and locating the rightful owner. That's in this set of papers over here on the counter. Fill in your full names, social security numbers, and addresses, and then sign. Do not use fake names or numbers. This is for your new bank accounts. You're also being retained as consultants to the firm of Warren & Associates. For that, you'll each get $240,000 a year deposited to the bank accounts in your names, $20,000 a month beginning now and ending with your death. Your taxes will be figured and filled out here in this office and deducted from your pay, even if you move to another state. The taxes you owe will be paid on time. The reason for following these procedures is to keep you on the right side of the law and protect us all. Understood?
We can hear, said Keegan.
Yes, Copes said.
Is that agreeable?
It should be more, Keegan said.
We're old. We could die in a month.
Then we won't miss it, Copes said.
You know it's more than we ever thought there even was, and it all got stolen from his mother.
Okay, Keegan said. It's enough.
The next part of the meeting was devoted to having Linda Warren, Charles Warren, Keegan and Copes sign legal documents, and Vesper Ellis and Martha Wilkes sign as witness and notary. When this had all been accomplished, Keegan and Copes stood up. Copes said, "We appreciate that you lived up to our agreement. Thank you."
Keegan said, "Unless the reason you had this meeting on a Sunday was that the banks are closed, so we can't check the accounts."
Copes shrugged. "Either way, we'll be nearby for a while." He walked toward the door. Keegan said, "Easy to reach." He gave a nod to Charlie Warren, then turned and walked after Copes. As Martha was collecting the papers, careful to be sure each page of each set was kept separate from the others, she picked up another set of papers with a cover on it.
"What's this one? Were they supposed to sign it?"
"I don't remember what it is," Charlie said. "Take a look."
Martha opened the folder and read, "Bonus payment to Martha Wilkes, $1,400,000? What the—"
"Oh, yeah," he said. "Now I remember."
Linda said, "I knew I wouldn't be able to sit here and give so much to them and nothing to you. It's to set the universe back in balance." One night, 6 months after the meeting with Copes and Keegan, Charlie and Vesper were out to dinner at Paradis. As Charlie signed the bill and put away his credit card, Vesper said, just loudly enough so the older people at the next table heard, "I loved that dinner, but there must have been something in it. Now I can't keep my hands off you, so if I were you, I'd take me right home."
"Thank you, that's all I'm saying in public," she whispered.
"You're so fun to embarrass. I can't seem to resist."
"Maybe we can get out of here before you think of anything to add. Ready to go?"
"Yes."
They got up and walked out through the rounded arches of climbing roses and down the quiet street toward Charlie's parked car. When they reached the darkest part of the block, Charlie stopped, turned to face her, produced a small velvet box, and opened it. Then he got down on one knee.
"What a gorgeous ring, Charlie," Vesper said. "You have such good taste, and I'm flattered. But, no. Get up and come home with me."
He stood. "Why don't you want to get married?"
"I've been married. I mostly liked it, but nowhere near as much as I like being with you the way I am. And partly thanks to you, I have no practical reason to get married again. Give me a compelling reason to get married sometime, and I will, like one of us gets demented or pregnant or something."
He stood up. "Do you want me to hold on to the ring?"
"I think it would be smart. Things change, and I love the ring." This has been a Highbridge production. Read by L.J. Ganser, a member of SAG-AFTRA. Copyright 2025 by Thomas Perry. Produced by arrangement with Mysterious Press. Recording copyright 2025 by Highbridge, a division of Recorded Books.